We have a Category 5 hurricane on our hands now, 160 miles per hour. So if you remember Michael last year, which was up to 160 after further review, we have the same kind of hurricane on our hands that is moving through the Bahamas. There's no getting around that. It's making its way toward the Abacos right now and eventually Grand Bahama Island and towards the southeast U.S. as well. Overnight, these models have trended a little bit to the west. Is this going to be something that continues today? All right. Yeah, take a deep breath with these things because we're asking an awful lot of a 160-mile-an-hour hurricane to come west, stop, and then start to turn to the north. Where does it make that turn? That is the multi-million and potentially multi-billion dollar question. All right. So something to watch. Cat 5 hurricane, guys. The hurricane hunters, of course, finding a lower pressure. They went out there and found SFMR winds 173 miles an hour. So they've corrected those a little bit. So if we're running hot by about 12 to 13 miles an hour, hence the 160. And the SFMR is the instrument they use to actually measure that winds. And it's been, at times, very, very good. We've got all sorts of coverage for you this morning, of course. Here, we've got Paul Goodloe in Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston, of course, very worried because it is a low city. It has been battered by high tide issues, even on a sunny day. So now you throw onshore wind and a king tide into the mix. And so Charleston, even with a hurricane offshore, could have some problems. All right, so that's something we're going to keep an eye on. All right, so let's look at this. Again, 160, Cat 5, 927 is the pressure they've used. One of the things I'm watching, too, is the speed. I want you guys to watch this at home, too. Moving west at 8 miles an hour, so it hasn't slowed at all. It's still steady state 8 miles an hour. Once that starts to slow, maybe that's the beginning of the weakened ridge. And then we'll wait for it to start moving north around the west side of that ridge. But until that west movement slows down or stops, you gotta stay alert, okay? We're still in the cone. You can see that. You can see the indication of that turn even in the cone. Notice how it moves west and then the cone starts to take shape north. So that keeps much of Florida in the cone, South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, even Virginia and the Chesapeake Bay and the Tidewater in this cone as well. Some of the guidance brings it in over the Outer Banks and even across southeast Virginia. So that's something to keep in mind. Vero Beach down to West Palm and Boca, that's where the tropical storm warnings are. And like the Bahamas, that are going to deal with a prolonged period of disastrous wind, we will see a prolonged period of tropical storm force wind and gusts here in South Florida. All right, so we're on the Treasure Coast here in Martin County, and that's what we're looking at. Again, we'll see what happens with that guidance today. A lot of eyeballs are going to be on that 12Z guidance, that morning run. The good news is, what's really been great is there's two missions going on with the hurricane hunters. The low-level invest, which gave us the Cat 5, but they're also flying high-altitude invest. So they're looking at the atmosphere. Let's make a grid of this atmosphere around the hurricane that we can throw into the computer models to give us better data and better output. Because let's face it, you got a whole northern hemisphere that's trying to blend itself into this hurricane and through here, and how that goes and how we tweak here or there. You know, we could easily see tweaks, 50 to 100 miles of different assets. We've seen it before. We've seen it in the past. I mean, remember Matthew? We didn't really know what Matthew was going to do until it was actually happening, because it was coming in and then moving north. We thought it was going to come ashore near Daytona. No, it kind of bounced and stayed off the coast. So I don't want anyone to put their card down in any stretch of the imagination. So here it comes. Look at this thing. Talk about ominous. Look at the Abacos. Look at these winds gusting almost to 60 miles per hour now. We're not in the worst part of the eye wall yet, but we're going to be within probably the next hour in through here. Rocky Bay, calm right now, but that's not going to be that way. And if it goes right over Guanacaste, Great Guanacaste, they're gonna go right down to zero with wind. They'll go completely. I mean, look how clear that eye is. Okay, you get a sunburn in that eye right now. Then you get on the other side of the storm, and you get the winds out of the south and get absolutely crushed. Look at the storm surge, 15 to 20 feet. So we're bringing the water up around the storm, and then we got waves on top of that that are going to be banging into the bays and cays and all these little inlet areas. You're probably going to see the Bahamas reshape forever as a result of this hurricane and the prolonged, period of really harsh weather conditions. Really harsh weather conditions. All right, guys, let's talk about what we know right now. We are going to go back to the Weather Channel studios, I believe, and talk to Reynolds Wolf about that. Okay, so I'm sorry, Paul Goodloe, just going by my script here, guys. It's changing by the minute. So, Paul, let's talk about Charleston. You've been there before, I've been there before, where even on a sunny day, when we have these king tides, if the wind is just right, it's bringing in a lot of water. And it's coming into downtown, and it's salt water.
Yeah, exactly, Jim. But before we talk about Charleston, let's go back to that picture of the Bahamas, because, you know, we're talking there are thousands of people down there right now, and they're in harm's way. We can show that satellite image showing the winds. You mentioned earlier Hurricane Wilma and the Carolinas and Cancun and the Yucatan. And Jim, that hurricane kind of sat there and stalled and forever changed the beaches there across Cancun and the Yucatan Peninsula. And that's, like you mentioned, the fear we have right now for the northern Bahamas, the northwestern Bahamas. So Nassau might not get it as bad as the Grand Bahama Island, and immediately right now, all the Abaco Islands as well. In fact, little inside baseball, we were thinking about going there, but you know what? It's just too dangerous. And now it's a Category 5 hurricane. There are not many high points on that island. If you've ever been to the Bahamas, it's beautiful. Great diving, great sailing, a great island life. But like you mentioned, this thing could be changed forever. We zoom on in, we can show you how close that center is. And once we start getting into the most intense winds, you might have the eye to come through. Then we have the backside of the hurricane, and it is slowing down. Right now, it's crawling at 8 miles per hour, but it's forecast to even get slower as it kind of sits there across the northern Bahamas. So they're going to be in this for probably a day and a half. And our thoughts and prayers are out there. I know that they have a lot of hardened structures out there, but just like other countries, even this country, if you got the money, you can build the house to withstand this, but a lot of people don't. So instead of having the metal roofs, they have wood and other structures that will not withstand a lashing that Dorian is setting them. So again, send your prayers out this Sunday morning to the residents there and the people who live in the northwestern Bahamas. They're going to be in this for a while. All right, back here at home, as Jim was mentioning, it's all about the track and when this thing starts turning more towards the northwest and then towards the north and head on towards the Georgia coastline, the South Carolina coastline, the North Carolina coastline. Will it make a landfall? Now it's even stronger. We'll see what happens in the next model run in terms of where the National Hurricane Center is putting this. But the bottom line is we're still going to have impacts from South Florida right on through the entire east coast of Florida into the Georgia coast, into the South Carolina and North Carolina coast. The good news is if you're here in Charleston, even North Carolina, you still have time to prepare. There's still time for this forecast track to be honed in, and whether it's going to make a direct impact, push more towards the east or more towards the west. And it all depends on where that goes, what impacts we'll see. Here in Charleston, we're surrounded by water on all sides of this city except the northwest side. So we're talking as that storm creates its waves and its winds, pushing everything back to the coast, we're going to see the rivers back up. So as you also have potentially heavy rain falling within 100 miles of the coastline as well, all that rain fills into the rivers and then pushes towards Charleston on three sides here. So the fresh water is starting the rivers to rise. The winds from the ocean are backing the rivers up. So you have all types of flooding. You have freshwater flooding from the rivers and the rainwater. And then you have the push from the ocean coming in here, and you have a combination of saltwater and freshwater flooding. This area hasn't been hit directly by a hurricane in, I think 30 years since Hurricane Hugo in 1989. But you don't have to have a direct impact to have major impacts. Think about Hurricane Matthew just 3 years ago, and where I'm standing right now, I'd be underwater. We're going to pull some file video to show you our team coverage here back in 2016 with Hurricane Matthew. Again, not making a direct landfall here, but still having massive impacts. So rule of thumb, if you flood it in Matthew, despite all the upgrades they've done here, there's a good chance you're going to see flooding as we head into this week. And we don't expect that to really start until we head on towards Wednesday and Thursday. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, Paul, it's going to be a long week, but at least on that note, we have time to prepare, right? And that is certainly a good thing. All right, guys, as Dorian closes in on the northwestern Bahamas today, Prime Minister says, hey, anyone who doesn't heed those warnings or hasn't at this point, because we're getting some really nasty weather in the Abacos, could expect, quote, catastrophic consequences, end quote. And I don't really need to define what that is, but take a visual on that one. States of emergency are in place for parts of Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. So yes, we're not in the center point of the cone, but we are in the cone. The cone is a track cone. That is where the center could move to. And so there's still the potential that it doesn't make the turn. And if you're just joining us, I'm going to say this all morning long while I'm on the air. Overnight, the models have trended west. The Hurricane Center's track has trended a little bit to the west with that. Does that trend continue in the models today? That is a potential multi-billion-dollar question, especially given the Cat 5 we're looking out there out there right now. Florida, of course, has 20 urban search and rescue teams on standby should they be needed. So let's talk about potential impacts here. Even with this little shift to the west, believe it or not, kind of puts us now in an issue where rain comes back into play a little bit. We've been dry on the First Coast and the Space Coast, all right? But the Treasure Coast and the Gold Coast have been wet. We're talking about the whole eastern side of Florida. Those are the 4 coasts there. And South Florida is the Treasure Coast and, of course, the Gold Coast. Now you've got the potential of bringing in 5 to 8. And look how close we are to that 12 to 8 inch area, 12 to 18 inch area. Another little jog to the west, and that kind of brings us back into that flood potential that we were talking about a couple of days ago before all the guidance shifted onto the east. Sunday, we're fine day to day to do what you got to do, prepare along the coast. But as you prepare, think about the fact that this slow movement with the turn and the expanding hurricane wind field means that we're going to be in these winds for 36 hours. All right, so kind of a long, drawn-out event. You can see it coming north. Now, again, the model here, the European model, does make that turn. This was the last run of that, and it does make that turn and pull this on off to the north. Jacksonville Beach, 35, 40 miles an hour by the time we go into Wednesday at 4 p.m. Look at West Palm, still 15 to 20 out of the northwest. So that's going to push the water back offshore once the storm goes by. But before then, we are bringing in huge waves. We are talking about very large swells here. Some of these will be 30, 40 feet offshore. But that wave energy is making its way toward the coastline. And you know as well as I do, even if you get a quarter of that, you're going to beat the hell out of the beaches. You're going to really beat them up, especially for a prolonged period. So guys, here in Stewart, where I am in the Treasure Coast in Martin County, again, I think we're fine that it'll be an isolated shower or thunderstorm. It'll be breezy along the coast. The waves will increase, as we saw from the wave model, right? 85, 83, 90 respectively, but our worst weather here will be Monday and Tuesday. Monday afternoon through Tuesday night in some cases, with things gradually winding down, certainly as we get in toward Wednesday. But that means the northern part of the state, that means the Carolinas will certainly see an increase in the energy there. We have a long week ahead of us. But right now, focus a little bit on our friends in the Bahamas. Hope they evacuated, hope they got to higher ground and in an area that they can be safe from the water. But think about if they can't get off the island and they're going to be dealing with that wind. Even if you get to higher ground, to have 36 hours of 25 to 30 hours of 150 mile an hour winds, that's just brutal. It plays with the mind a lot, trust me. All right, so let's say a little prayer for those guys this morning. All right, guys, again, that's what we're looking at here from Stewart. Folks out and about. The good news is we've had so much warning on this. People have been prepared ahead of time. Now it's almost like everyone is just waiting. And hopefully, Paul Goodlow, we will not see any more trend in the model guidance to the west, because that means bigger and bigger impacts here for the east coast of Florida.
Yeah, for sure. But I got to say, all bets are off really with Dorian. It's had so many, twists and turns this entire week. In fact, it started the week Monday in Puerto Rico. And at that point, the forecast was Dorian to be a tropical storm as it moves on to the west side of the island, but it passed on the east side of the island 2 days later. So, Dorian is very, very unique. We always keep telling people every single storm and hurricane are unique. Don't rely on what happened in the past and tell you what's going to happen in the future in terms of what this one is going to do. Oh, it's only a 2, only a 3. Well, now it's a Category 5 hurricane. Remember, they don't have brakes. So as this thing kind of spins towards the coast, we can still have Cat 5 impacts, despite the fact the winds might come down to a Cat 3 in a couple of days. We're still going to have impacts out there, waves created by these winds that will lash the shore, as well as storm surge. All right, here's a forecast. We've been showing you this for days now, and the latest trend is for this potentially to push back towards the coast. So you basically read the center point of these lines of where we're expected. So as we head on towards early midweek here by Wednesday or so, It's also a different track in terms of which model you choose, but both models are saying it's going to stay offshore of Florida, the center, that is, not all the impacts, and then offshore of the Georgia coast, and then move on towards perhaps the Outer Banks of North Carolina, or perhaps close to South Carolina. You take a look at the two positions by Thursday of the European model versus the GFS, the American model. American model has it definitely hitting the Outer Banks here as we head on towards Thursday, while the European is up towards Myrtle Beach. Bottom line is here in Charleston, massive impact starting on Wednesday, going on through Thursday. Right now, I believe you have some live pictures from Nassau in the Bahamas. The good news is you're a little further south. Oh, you're going to see and feel some impacts from this hurricane, but you will not be directly hit by the eye. That's the islands to the north by about 100 miles or so. We're talking Grand Bahama and the Abacos. Say a prayer for the people of the Northwest Bahamas so they can survive Hurricane Dorian, Category 5 hurricane.
Discover new San Pellegrino Essenza, a twist of Mediterranean flavors with the gentle bubbles of...
Did it at all. Well, now we look at the visible satellite picture this morning, and this loop with the center of this Category 5 hurricane working its way toward the Bahamas. And while I was just noticing on the western end of this satellite, do you see these eyelashes, these higher level clouds that are going, if you will, perpendicular to the circulation itself? That is an absolute sign of intensification for satellite. They're called crossband cirrus, and you can see them as plain as day right there. But the fact that the sun's coming up in the east, the western part of the eye wall is lit, and it's so tall you can't even get the sun's light all the way to the ground of it. So these, you're looking at something here that's 40, 50,000 foot stacked, and of course big shadows on the eastern side of it. You can't even make out the definition yet. But as the sun continues to go up and it goes overhead, you'll be able to look right down in that stadium. Which it'll be a nice little stadium effect there, and maybe even see some vortices rotating down in the middle of the eye. This is as bad as it gets, all right? This is Michael, essentially, this year with Dorian in terms of strength, 160-mile-an-hour hurricane. So right now we've had some gusts. I think the highest gust I've heard on Guana Cay, Great Guana Cay, has been 48 miles per hour. Right now we're sitting there around 48. You can see Nassau is essentially calm. And this is what I was talking about. If you take where that is and extrapolate it off to the west over toward Freeport, which could see a major impact from this, Nassau's kind of on the southern fringes of this, just kind of outside that eye wall. Now, if the storm decided to jog more southwest, that's a different story. That puts Nassau in more harm and through here. But look at Marsh Harbor come about 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon today. All right, 75, 90 miles per hour. We know they're going to be higher gusts, a lot higher gusts than that. Freeport gets into it overnight tonight. You'll be into those hurricane winds. And this is at present speed. This slows down, and it's worse for a longer period of time because we really don't think the Bahamas are going to decrease the strength of this all that much. If we drop down to 150 or 145, you've still got a catastrophic hurricane on your hands. All right, because you're up at that point now in the high-end Cat 4 and Cat 5 range where it's just catastrophic in terms of the wind damage. So here we go, guys. Again, looking through the Bahamas, going into Tuesday at 9, we finally start getting a little bit of a break. This is 9 p.m., by the way. 9 p.m. on Tuesday. Freeport's still gusting 40, 50 miles per hour. People will still be hard-pressed to even get out of any kind of structures that were in there. And there is the storm surge. Depending on which side of if you're getting offshore now in Marsh Harbor, you could get onshore once the storm goes to your west. Freeport, you will start offshore, then you will go onshore, and that will bring in the surge. So literally you're going to have a bowl of water that's sloshing around out there and moving with the change in wind direction. Well, speaking of water and sloshing around, we may have that coming into the play for Charleston. Paul, I mean, the one saving grace for this potentially is the guidance, at least the latest guidance, does have it offshore, not by much, but we've got time to prepare. We've got time to prepare in Charleston.
And right now, we're not really noticing too many preparations are underway, but I think people, the sense is they know they have time. So they're definitely watching this closely. And once we get towards Tuesday, they got to start taking action because then by Wednesday, we'll start seeing impacts. And by the way, we still have a chance of scattered thunderstorms today. They had some rain yesterday. That caused some minor flooding. So this is a city that's like that with flooding. It happens a lot of the times here when you have rain just in a general summer thunderstorm or a nor'easter. You have a tropical storm or a hurricane come this way, we have a lot more impacts. With the rain, causing the rivers to run high. And then you have the winds and the waves from the ocean coming in here, backing up the river. So a big concern. We're going to talk more about that throughout the morning, but take a live look at the pictures from Nassau, Bahamas. You're under a hurricane warning. Hurricane Dorian is bearing down to the north of you. We're talking gusting to 34 miles per hour right now in Nassau. You're going to be in the thick of this until we head on towards Tuesday evening.
Delicious high-fiber Raisin Bran.
Sure you don't want me to come with you?
I'm very sure.
Because I can. Make good choices.
You make good choices.
I am. Fiber's good for digestive health.
Good choices never tasted so good. Raisin.
We've had another dramatic drop in pressure, certainly during the overnight hours, starting at 8 p.m., 941, now down to 927. And then that ominous looking eye that's just sitting there about 15 miles wide, working its way to the west. There's still lightning in that eye as of a recent satellite picture, so it's still developing. We may not be done with the bottoming out of this, believe it or not. And there you can see Great Guana Cay, actually some of the stronger winds up there we had earlier, up to 60 miles per hour. Up toward Great Guana. 58, I think, is what they topped out at. Rocky Bay now getting windy as well. Their anemometer may be having issues. So I can't believe they're calm. I'd really be shocked if they were calm. We're not doing bad in central Abaco. Nassau, we saw they're gusting to 33 miles per hour. So there's plenty of wind over the Bahamas, and obviously from what we saw with the waves are huge. Huge waves rolling into the Bahamas right now. So hurricane warnings there, hurricane watch south. Nassau, you're in the hurricane warnings. Remember that. And here you go from Boca to Vero, we've got the tropical storm warnings. And should a further jog to the south and west happen with this, that's what we're watching for right now as the new guidance comes in. The hurricane hunters are out there with a high altitude aircraft too. They look at the top of the atmosphere all the way down to near the surface circulation. All right, and they're dropping what we call dropsondes, instruments to look at the atmosphere. Currently, that data goes into the models, and we get a better picture of what this thing is going to do. But the trend is, the farther west we go, unfortunately, the farther west the impacts will be for the United States. All right, let's go to Paul Goodloe in Charleston, South Carolina. Paul, can you recall for us what happened with Matthew in terms of Charleston's impacts?
So I remember Matthew, Jim, I was actually in Jacksonville because the track was very similar to Dorian early on, where it kept kind of moving up the coast of Florida and eventually missed Florida altogether, also missed the Georgia coastline, and then made landfall just north of here into North Carolina. But we still have massive impacts here in Charleston. We're trying to get video. Mike Bettis was here in Charleston, and it just slammed this city. Because you got to remember, or if you don't know Charleston, we are surrounded on three sides by water, by rivers coming towards. But then you have Matthew, which at that point, in Category 1, pushing the water back up the rivers, not to mention bringing water in from the Atlantic. So massive flooding around here. And we could see similar conditions as we head on towards this Wednesday and Thursday. Updated just minutes ago here, and unfortunately we still have impacts on the way currently across the Bahamas, but also as we head later today, as we head on towards South Florida and eventually here into the Carolinas. I'm live here in Charleston, South Carolina, a city that knows flooding all too well. In fact, the last time we had a hurricane impact this state of South Carolina, it was 3 years ago. That was Hurricane Matthew, and Matthew took a very similar path as it kind of skimmed the coast of Florida and Georgia, and then made landfall just north of here into South Carolina, also majorly impacting North Carolina as well. Right now, the forecast track for the National Hurricane Center has potential landfall in the U.S. in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. But it still doesn't mean we won't have impacts, major impacts here, because they had major impacts with Matthew as a Category 1. The forecast is for not a Category 5 as it passes by here, but still maybe even a Category 2 hurricane offshore. And we've had massive impacts. Again, rain, freshwater flooding is going to be a big concern. The city of Charleston surrounded on three sides by rivers here. So as the rain hits the ground, feeds into the rivers start to rise. And then offshore, you have the winds being lashed from Dorian, pushing the ocean water back into the Charleston Sound area and the bay, as well as pushing back the rivers. So we have a lot more a combination of saltwater and freshwater flooding because there's no way for the freshwater to get out in the ocean, so everything starts to rise, and that comes into people's homes and businesses here in much of Charleston. In fact, the hotel we're staying at, the parking lot is 5 feet above sea level, and I know with Matthew, it caused the third highest tidal surge in history, in terms of recorded history here. That's third behind Hurricane Hugo, which hit 30 years ago in 1989. So still a big concern here. If you did have flooding in Matthew, there's going to be a good chance, I put money on you're probably going to have flooding when it comes to Dorian coming here. The good news is we have days away. The impact's currently being felt in the Bahamas. Here across the Charleston area as we head on towards Wednesday into Thursday. That's the time zone of seeing the most highest impact across the area. Not to mention, we've been dealing with daily rain showers here as well, and a heavy rain shower could also cause some flooding on any typical summer day. So still a big concern here as we lead up to the closest approach of Hurricane Dorian. Let's go back down the coast to Stuart, Florida, where Jim Cantore is. And Jim, you guys are already expecting some impacts a lot quicker than we will. I believe you guys are still under is it a hurricane or tropical storm watch right now?
Tropical storm warning, Paul, here from Boca Raton all the way up to Vero Beach. So we're right in the heart of that, being on the Treasure Coast. We've already had waves starting to build offshore. They are coming in now. They are only going to get higher. Let's find out what they're going to do here in Mountain County, specifically in Stuart. Let's talk to the captain, Captain Joseph, Tominelli? Tuminelli. I knew I had one vowel off. One off by one vowel is terrible. Anyway, I apologize, Paisan. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about this. Yesterday there was talk of a mandatory evac starting at 10. That was lifted last night. Is there the potential that goes back into play today with the westward shift?
The westward shift, we're looking at an 11:15 meeting, and EOC is going to discuss that potential of evacs and stuff like that. So there's nothing mandatory still at this point.
Right. That was postponed. So it may come back into play, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
And if that comes back into play now, that goes into sheltering and things like that, right? Because these are people you need to leave.
Like that, and that is the determination of Martin County EOC.
So paint a picture for us. 36 hours, big waves on the beach, tropical storm force gusts. Do we lose power typically here with a situation like that? Do we beat up the beach? Is there going to be overwash in areas? What is that going to do to your area?
It depends on the situation. I mean, we're no strangers to these hurricanes. Obviously, 2004, we had a couple come right up East Ocean Boulevard. We've dealt with those pretty well. Our FPL responses are really good. They have the standby, and we're usually typically pretty well prepared for that.
All right. So just like the rest of us, we're waiting on this thing, right? What's it going to do?
Sir.
All right, Captain Tuminelli, we appreciate it, buddy. Thanks
you
for talking to us.
Hey, you gave me a demotion.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I give you a demotion of? Chief of police. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I apologize. Anyway, let's talk about Florida impacts here. Otherwise, with the Chief of Police Tuminelli that we just spoke of, and certainly they're going to be meeting at 11:15 this morning. All right, let's talk about this. Miami, Gainesville, Orlando, Tampa, West Palm, gas stations. This was updated just recently, and you can see, we're running anywhere from about 40% to just over 50%. They're still bringing gas too. So some areas that may not have gas last night may have it again this morning, because a lot of this happens during the overnight hours, a lot of the resupplying, so they don't have to deal with, the large lines and things like that at gas stations. Typically if you go first thing in the morning, sometimes you'll see a tanker out there. In this case, because of the demand for gas, there may be even more tankers coming in. I would think we're going to be going up instead of down in terms of this. But it's important, obviously, to keep bringing the gas in, especially with this western track shift. All right, so some of the 12Z guidance is out now. I've seen nothing that brings it on shore. All right, that's the good news. Even the H-WRF does not bring it on shore into Florida, but it's still west of where it was 24 hours ago. So, we're going to inch those wind and water impacts in terms of heavy rain a little bit farther east. We'll be right back.
Okay, everyone, our mission.
Could I just ask you, 2 days ago, we were given a really comprehensive briefing, and they seemed to think almost every prediction was that it was going to go right through Florida and into the Gulf, actually right across Florida. Does that not have a chance of happening now, or what do you think? I mean, everything seems now it goes up north. What do you think the chances that it goes directly straight, as the original predictions were?
Yeah, this well inside this cone. It just kind of gets the variability in that forecast track. And what's happened with time, once it slowed down, the forecast had to nudge to the north because now it has that influence with that trough. Teeny changes can make a big difference in the eventual movement of these storms. Literally thousands of parameters that we're trying to measure and put into the computer models to be able to get these tracks. So a small wobble, a small change can cause that forecast track to nudge a little bit. That's why there's so much uncertainty. And we spend a lot of time talking about the actual cone because, you look at the last 5 years and that's the forecast error possible with that track. So we try to communicate these uncertainties and it does happen, especially when you're measuring thousands of parameters, trying to get that into the models, you can have these small changes.
How certain are you that it'll go north?
Every single computer model that we have is pulling this to the north. But the big question we have is about where that center is going to go. And that's why we're really trying to communicate the edge of that cone. That landfall literally could be right on the coast, anywhere in Florida and even up the Carolinas. We could see a landfall too soon where you can have some damage right along the coast. But we're trying to communicate, even if it's offshore, look at the size. I mean, remember the NOAA satellite, how big the storm is. Even if it's offshore, that could bring some devastating impacts even on the coast. We're trying to communicate that size and really try to focus people on this large system and not just the center.
Great job. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Mr. President, we are joined today, as you mentioned, by governors from Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. We begin first with Governor DeSantis.
All right, so that was President Donald Trump getting a briefing from FEMA administrators and meteorologists about the projected path of Hurricane Dorian. And that all-important piece of information you heard them say, it's not necessarily the center of the storm, but it's always the impacts that are felt well outside of the center. So regardless of if there's a landfall in Florida, in Georgia, in North Carolina, or South Carolina, you should be ready and prepared for impacts well beyond the center of that hurricane. I mean, closer to 20 miles per hour, 20 miles north to south and east to west is that eye wall. But outside of that, by several miles, you do have hurricane force winds. And then beyond that, you have tropical storm force winds. Here we are in Vero Beach along the barrier island. And I can tell you this, the winds are close to 20 to 25 miles an hour. And they haven't really stopped all day today. We've maybe had a brief break here or there, but by and large, it's been a windy day today. It's also been a sunny day today. But Dr. Postel, we're going to bring you in for expert analysis because in short order, we will start to see the weather conditions deteriorate here between Monday and into Tuesday.
Yeah, Tevin, you're right. And we've got some latest information from the Hurricane Center where Dorian has made landfall on Elbow Cay in the Abacos Islands of the Bahamas. And if you look inside of this satellite picture, you can see that is the case. There is Marsh Harbor right there, and the lightning-filled thunderstorms surround it completely. And in the eye wall, right surrounding that sort of clear spot, the wind gusts are likely over 200 miles per hour with storm surge inundation levels perhaps over 20 feet. The kind of condition that is unimaginable and unprecedented. We are in uncharted territory trying to describe to you what many may be going through in this part of the Bahamas. So on the radar charts, there's valuable information here. The eye wall, which is about 10 miles wide, which is right, that donut ring right there, that's where the winds over 100 miles per hour are. When you look at it on satellite pictures, it is an ominous sight. But lots of these showers out here and some of those rain areas do not have the hurricane force winds. In fact, they are basically confined to the donut ring that surrounds the eye. That is where potentially those unimaginable conditions are, with, again, maybe wind gusts over 200 miles per hour. This is an ominous sight to have Category 5 Dorian with now 185 mile per hour winds on the latest advisory from the Hurricane Center. 185. That is on the same camera view as Florida. This should raise awareness very quickly that it is a close call. We are dealing with an extremely powerful and in an unprecedented level a hurricane moving this close to the Florida Peninsula in just a couple of days' time. There's a time on the top. But let's just say the hurricane, the center of it, Dorian, passes along the National Hurricane Center's expected track. Now, we know there's forecast errors associated with this, and we know that it's possible that this track could wobble west, this track could wobble east. But let's say it moves on this. The core of the hurricane force winds, the eye wall, would remain offshore, but by a distance that's less than the average error for the forecast at 48 hours. That means you're not off the hook in Florida from that kind of wind. There is some possibility, not a high possibility, but some possibility of winds over hurricane force in this region, with gusts perhaps well over that into maybe 100-mile-per-hour range. We will be watching these trends in the forecast, and stay tuned for all the latest. We are right now leaving you with some of the conditions earlier on Abaco Island. Right now, they are considerably worse than that. Stay tuned for all the latest. We'll have it for you all day, all night, continuously.
Just between us, you know what's better than mopping? Anything.
It's just absolutely devastating, life-threatening situation for the Bahamas as we have the approach of this Cat 5 hurricane.
You're probably going to see the Bahamas reshaped forever as a result of this hurricane.
I just got a piece of paper handed to me. The hurricane hunters are out there. This thing is still strengthening.
All right, you are taking a look at a major hurricane, 185-mile-per-hour winds. This is a Category 5 storm by the name of Hurricane Dorian. It has already made landfall in Elbow Cay in the Bahamas and still on its warp path towards the west, close to 7 miles per hour in movement. The ever-anticipated turn, when does it turn? That is, of course, what a lot of Floridians will be watching in the next 16 to 36 hours. Welcome back into the Weather Channel. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten joining you live from Vero Beach, Florida. Right now, we are under a hurricane watch and tropical storm warnings for the Barrier Island. That means winds could exceed 39 miles per hour today, tomorrow, and possibly into Tuesday as well. What does that mean for some of the businesses here? Well, they are already boarded up. The Barrier Island, of course, police are watching and law enforcement officials are watching. How quickly will those tropical storm force winds arrive? Because then they cut off access to the Barrier Island for people to come in. Of course, they will do as much as they can to usher people out when those winds arrive. We do know that right now we actually have voluntary evacuations today, mandatory evacuations in effect tomorrow here in Indian River County. We spoke to the emergency management officials just about 2 to 3 hours ago. They have actually 6 shelters staged right now, one for people with special needs and one for people with pets as well. So you can check my Twitter page at Tevin Wooten. I'll be posting that as soon as I can here within the next 10 to 15 minutes. I just got that information in from the emergency managers here in Indian River County. Let's show you what it looks like right now in the Bahamas, where we have already seen high winds, a lot of rainfall, getting sideswiped right now and waylaid by this massive hurricane, folks. If you have family or friends, or if you know someone there, if you don't know someone there, send out a massive prayer for those in the Bahamas right now. We're taking a look at some of the video here. Of course, we will do everything we can to cover this storm and every aspect. We have a crew of reporters and meteorologists spread out, not only in the field, but in the Weather Channel headquarters right now. We have storm specialist Carl Parker with expert analysis on Hurricane Dorian. Carl.
Tevin, it is difficult to overstate the import of what is happening right now. We are looking at a storm that is within the top 6 most intense hurricanes by landfall in the Atlantic Basin, and that is in the record. Also, the most intense hurricane to affect the northern part of the Bahamas. And here are the particulars on the storm. Once again, 185-mile-per-hour storm, Category 5 storm, now moving at west at 8 miles per hour, and it's going to be much too close for comfort in Florida. And let's take a look at what's going on with the storm right now, and you just will not see a more well-formed storm than that. An incredibly powerful storm here that has made landfall. The eye is now coming over Marsh Harbor, home to about 6,000 people in the Bahamas, and the violence that is occurring now in the Bahamas is unspeakable. We're talking about winds likely gusting over 200 miles per hour, along with storm surge values above 20 feet. The elevation in Marsh Harbor is 13 feet. It is just awful to think about what is happening in the northern part of the Bahamas right now as the storm very slowly works along towards the west. So there is the storm surge forecast, 18 to 23 feet. Also looking at a storm surge potential along the east coast of Florida, 4 to 7 feet from Jupiter and on northward towards the Treasure Coast, and 2 to 4 feet down to almost Deerfield Beach. So this is a look at the model forecast over the next couple of days. We have talked much about the fact that the storm is going to slow down dramatically, so it is going to be a relentless pounding of the most intense type of hurricane imaginable here in the northern part of the Bahamas. This is forever going to change parts of the northern Bahamas over the next couple of days. That is 36 hours right there of relentless wind and surge and heavy rain across the northern Bahamas. And then it gets very, very close to the U.S. And the models continue to forecast a turn to the north sometime on Tuesday. The question is, where exactly is that going to occur? Now, this is a look at our depiction of the hurricane force winds and tropical storm force winds based on the track from the National Hurricane Center. Now, the hurricane force winds in a relatively small area right now, that could change if we see what is called an eye wall replacement cycle, but right now extending out about 20 miles from the center. So as you follow this, as you follow this area, that area of hurricane force winds, only probably about 20 miles from the coast on Tuesday, only about 20 miles from the coast, and the average forecast error within this time frame, 48 hours, is about 70 miles, or more than 3 times that distance. So it's entirely possible that the storm will wobble a little farther to the west than is being forecast right now. And that's why when we look at the reasonable worst case scenario, we're looking at the possibility of hurricane force winds there along the east coast of Florida, from West Palm Beach up into Indian River and St. Lucie counties there, also to Vero Beach and the Treasure Coast as well. And then winds in tropical storm force range, mid to high grade tropical storm force range, well inland. That's the reasonable worst case scenario at this point. So that's why there are hurricane watches now in effect in Palm Beach County, Indian River, St. Lucie, and then on up into Brevard County as well. Hurricane conditions entirely possible. And again, this is based on this current track. And if that track changes, if it moves just a little farther to the west, that is greatly going to amplify all of those effects. It's going to be that much worse because this is such a powerful storm. We just do not see storms like this very often, though we have seen Category 4s over the last 4 consecutive years, and that is a new record in the Atlantic Basin. Storm surge watches now up. As I mentioned, 4 to 7 feet of surge is possible with this storm. There's going to be tremendous wave action. This is going to be just a huge impact on the beaches all up the coast. And then beyond that, the question is, where does it go? It's entirely possible that we see direct impacts in parts of South Carolina and North Carolina in particular. If the storm were to move a little bit farther west, it could be very, very close to Florida and Georgia as well. But you see that the Carolinas stick out a little bit more relative to that track. So that increases the chances of more direct impacts. And in fact, we might be looking at a landfall, in fact, in parts of South Carolina or North Carolina. So this is an incredibly serious situation, Tevin, by virtue of the fact that this is just the strongest type of storm imaginable, and it's going to be very, very close to the U.S. coast. An awful lot to be concerned about here over the next several days. Over to you.
And Carl, I'm glad you mentioned a strong storm. I mean, obviously with winds at 185 miles an hour and a Category 5, that's definitely on the top end of the spectrum, if you will. But let's talk pressure here. 911 millibars. Someone walked up to me a second ago and said, can it go any lower?
You know, I don't see why it wouldn't be able to go somewhat lower. When we talk about what is called the maximum potential intensity, that's how strong a storm can get. And that is based on the amount of warmth in the water, not just at the surface, but also to some depth, because as the storm is moving very slowly, it's churning up the water, and sometimes it can churn up cooler water, and that can lead to weakening. But as it's now moving over the Bahamas, that's where the ocean heat content is going to be at its highest. And so even if there is upwelling here, it will continue to bring up warm water. So the maximum potential intensity is well into Category 5 range here, and by some depth. So yes, I would say that it is possible that it could get stronger, though it is hard to imagine. I mean, this is just one of the strongest storms that we have seen. And as I mentioned, right now within the top 6 storms in terms of intensity at landfall in the Atlantic Basin, just an historic storm by many measures.
I mean, this is beyond textbook. This is something that I'm sure will be studied for the days, the months, the years, and perhaps even decades to come. Carl, thank you for that expert analysis. That, again, a lot of people you will not get anywhere else but here on the Weather Channel. We want to bring you up to speed on what we know right now in Indian River County and in Vero Beach. I told you guys about those shelters that open for South County. There's Indian River Academy. There's Oslo Middle School, Osceola Magnet. In Central County, there's Glifford Middle School, Glendale Elementary, VBHS. All these are on my Twitter page, @Tevin Wooten. Please go to that and find out a little bit more if you know family or friends that may be looking for shelter. And also, per the emergency managers here, Uber will be helping and assisting people get to those shelters for free. So check your Uber app for more information on that. They also have a special needs shelter and a pet-friendly shelter, too. Again, all that information, though, is open tomorrow, though, at noon. Meanwhile, though, we do want to let you know what the emergency managers here in Indian River County are feeling and what they are saying to those that may be worrisome about this storm. Take a listen.
The citizens of this county are used to tropical storms, used to hurricanes coming by. They're very reactive. They're very proactive. They take steps to take care of their personal property. Many of them have already left the area and have gone to other areas. But the community as a whole steps up and does the right things and follows the recommendations of local government.
In terms of impacts, what are you all expecting?
We're expecting very strong tropical storm force winds. Our biggest concern right now is the storm surge that's actually going to come with this, and the prediction of those storm surges. We're moderately concerned about topping over the dune lines and those types of things. So we want to make sure that everybody's off that barrier island so that they don't get stranded.
All right, so that was the director of the emergency managers here in Indian River County. Of course, we will be speaking with them as we get more information, or as they get more information, and we will certainly bring that to you. Let's go up north a little bit to the coastal plains of Georgia. I believe Felicia Combs, meteorologist Felicia Combs, standing by right now. Felicia, you were in Orlando yesterday. You made the trek north. How are people feeling, and what are you seeing right now in terms of preparations there in Savannah?
Hey, Tevin, thanks. Yeah, that's right. You know, I will say Dorian is the #1 thing on everyone's mind. I checked in yesterday to my hotel, and someone mentioned, hey, you know, we're on the watch for this storm. Just want to let you know how long you're going to be staying. And I said, yeah, I know we're on watch for the storm. Trust me. And then this morning, that's all everyone was talking about, asking, you know, how bad do you think it's going to be? Do you really think it's going to hit here? And I said, well, you know, the latest update, this is a monster storm. This is now a Category 5 storm. The strongest near the northwest Bahamas, and regardless of a direct impact or a direct hit from Dorian, you're going to feel impacts all along the southeast coast, and especially for places like Savannah that are so close to the water. So everyone is gearing up. Right now, we're in downtown Savannah, or the river area, and it's a pretty nice day. You can see the wind kind of blowing just on a normal day. What you're looking at is the Savannah River Cruise, one of the steamboats that takes people out. So I spoke with one of the sheriff's officers, and he said this place would just be absolutely packed, given that it's Labor Day weekend. But it's pretty quiet right now. That steamboat usually draws a pretty large crowd. People love to enjoy that. And then just looking across the river here, the Savannah River, toward that next bridge over there. In fact, right past that bridge, that is Beaufort County, South Carolina. And just earlier, the sheriff's office there gave a press conference saying, you know, they just want people to be prepared and keep an eye on the storm, but really take it seriously, even though we're not 100% sure exactly what is going to be happening with Dorian. And I think that's what's on everyone's mind. That forecast cone has wobbled back and forth so much over the past week or so that now this is something that people all along the southeast coast, especially here in Savannah, are really thinking about. And you know what is bringing to to a lot of people's minds, they're remembering Irma. Now, during Irma, this river, the Savannah River that you see here right behind me, this came up and this flooded this area out. There were businesses all along the historic Riverwalk that had to deal with flooding, and this is still strongly in people's minds. So, you know, everyone definitely taking precautions and getting prepared for Dorian here in Savannah. Back to you, Nick.
All right. Thanks so much, Felisa. Let's talk a little bit about what we know right now about Dorian. It's the strongest hurricane on record for the northwestern Bahamas now. Catastrophic conditions are occurring on the Abacos Islands of the Bahamas, even as we speak. This extremely dangerous and life-threatening hurricane is going to lash the Bahamas for hours. Back in the U.S., the city of Charleston, South Carolina, has declared a state of emergency there. This in anticipation of the effects of the rising water, the possible flooding, and the winds possible, too, up into South Carolina. We're gradually seeing the wind speed probabilities increase for tropical storm force winds. All this area here in purple is where we're going to see almost certainty of tropical storm force winds, 90% and above. And there is a tropical storm warning on the coast of Florida from north of Deerfield Beach to Sebastian Inlet, and that does include the West Palm Beach area. We're also going to find the timing of these tropical storm force winds coming in probably as we get through the day tomorrow. But notice, too, these lines fairly close together, indicating how slowly this system is expected to move. And so those tropical storm force winds will continue to increase all the way into Tuesday morning, Tuesday evening, then Wednesday morning, probably around the Charleston area, and sometime Wednesday on into Thursday around Wilmington, North Carolina. As far as hurricane winds, well, most of those probably staying offshore, but there is a hurricane watch out on the coast of Florida from north of Deerfield Beach to the border between Volusia and Brevard counties. And the probabilities are increasing now of the possibility thereof hurricane force winds, even northward up into areas of the South Carolina and North Carolina coastline. Winds right now, let's talk about the forecast winds, because this is the timeline as we get through the next couple of days. We'll watch those winds increase. Felicia, let's get back to you now in Savannah and talk more about how folks are preparing there.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Yeah.
And what we're looking at here is one of the most intense hurricanes we have ever seen in the Atlantic Basin. It is the 6th most intense at landfall by pressure on record in the Atlantic Basin. And look where this is relative to Florida, now moving west. The modeling indicating it's probably going to get to about here, the western edge of Grand Bahama Island, and then begin to turn to north. But look how close. Look how close this is. And you're talking about a storm that is producing just unspeakable conditions right now, perhaps winds gusting to near or over 200 miles per hour in the Bahamas, with water level rises on the order of 20 feet. A lot of the island only is about 15 feet high. I just really shudder to think about the amount of devastation that is going to be occurring, that is occurring right now, and our hearts going out to these people here in the northern part of the Bahamas. Just an awful, awful situation there. Here's a look at the radar picture, and this is the eye wall. This is the very worst of the wind. That's the area where there could be 200 plus mile per hour wind. And when we expand the picture out, again, you look at the distance between South Florida, Palm Beach County, and the western edge of Grand Bahama Island, that is only about 70 miles. 70 miles. That's how close this storm is expected to get. And that's assuming that it does what the modeling is suggesting that it will. And it is possible that it may not. And I want to show you the latest European model. And it shows the storm again getting to the western edge of Grand Bahama Island right there. That is Tuesday afternoon. So we're starting to feel the effects at that point. And then the storm is working up and along the coast, very, very close, and a little bit of a shift in that path is going to make a very big difference. It's going to amplify or raise the stakes considerably there along the east coast of Florida. This is a really, really close call. If it happens like this, it's probably going to be a lot like Matthew. Significant water level rises, a lot of wave action, beach erosion, coastal flooding, and that'll continue up and make its way towards Georgia and also into South Carolina. So when we look at the hurricane wind speed probabilities, they have been raised for parts of southeastern Florida, and that is on the order of about 50 to 60% in some parts of eastern Florida here. And that is why there are now hurricane watches in effect from Palm Beach County into St. Lucie County and on up into Brevard County as well. We certainly could be experiencing hurricane conditions beginning on Tuesday and going into Wednesday as well. We're going to continue our coverage of this historic storm coming up in just a few minutes.
Handyman, carpenters, DJs, roofers, painters, landscape.
Winds and flooding, and I urge everyone to take it seriously. The time to prepare is now. Now, while Dorian might weaken as it travels north, we know from experience how dangerous a slow-moving hurricane with heavy rains can be. Remember that the storm's category number matters less than the amount of rain and storm surge that it brings. My message today is this: North Carolina has to take this seriously. Be ready. I've declared a state of emergency for all of North Carolina. The storm might look far away, but it's already kicking up dangerous surf and riptides at our coast. The state of emergency that I've issued means that state and local government can get ready to respond to the storm and, if necessary, seek federal aid. I've also issued 2 waivers, one so that relief supplies and utility vehicles can move in and through our state, and another so that farmers can get crops out of the fields ahead of the storm and protect livestock. And in communication with farmers, we know that is happening. In the past 3 years, they have had this experience far too often. So they are working now, and these waivers allow them to have heavier trucks moving across to get their crops out. And now is the time to make sure that your family's prepared. Remember, Florence was a Category 1, but it caused days of deadly flooding due to constant rain. With that in mind, we know Dorian is still a few days away. So make sure that you have a well-stocked emergency kit, plenty of water and medicines that you may need to take, and enough food for several days. Figure out where you would go in the event you do have an evacuation order in your area. Have a way to stay informed and receive weather alerts. And you can always go to readync.org for checklists and reminders. Now, we don't know yet exactly where this storm will hit North Carolina, if it does at all. But to the people of our state, particularly those who live in southeastern North Carolina that has been battered by 2 strong hurricanes in less than 3 years, please know this: we are with you. State and local emergency managers and first responders are watching out for you. I continue to be amazed at the resilience, the dedication, and caring spirit of North Carolinians. And whatever comes, we will be ready. I have Lee Williamson, who is with me as my interpreter for the hearing impaired today, and also have with me Director Mike Sprayberry of Emergency Management. I'm going to turn it over to Mike for a few remarks and then open it to any questions that you might have. Mike?
Thank you, Governor. Definitely an historic storm, just unspeakable violence occurring right now in the Bahamas as that eye wall, that incredibly well-formed eye wall, crawls along near Marsh Harbor. We're looking at possibly winds over 200 miles per hour and a storm surge greater than 20 feet, and a lot of those islands have an elevation of somewhere around 15 feet. So this is going to be just horrible for the people of the Bahamas, unfortunately. Let's talk about where the storm is going to go beyond that. And we expect that it will turn to the north, but it's going to be very, very close. And by no means can we guarantee that there won't be very serious impacts along the Florida coast. Hurricane watches are up, as a matter of fact, from Palm Beach County up into the Treasure Coast. And then beyond that, there's even greater potential for more direct impacts in parts of South Carolina and North Carolina. And we're going to be answering your hurricane questions through the rest of the day today. You can send them to #HurricaneQuestions.
If you are going...
A Category 5 storm moving through the northwestern Bahamas right now. We know that we've already had a landfall near Elbow Cay. 185-mile-per-hour winds with this storm coming dangerously close to the east coast of Florida. Too close for comfort right now for a lot of people in the Sunshine State. We want to bring in the mayor of Vero Beach, though, because I know that you guys have been preparing. Mayor Val, can you first off tell us how that you guys have sort of been getting ready today, yesterday, and what you'll do tomorrow?
We've been preparing all week. I've seen everyone around town putting up their shutters. I think we're probably one of the most prepared cities in this in the United States for this hurricane. We've been through these before in 04, 05, and multiple since then. People got a great idea. Unfortunately, it did take a turn to the left last night in the last 12 hours. So now we're going to be activating our emergency shelters tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, the special needs, and at 12, the other shelters. We're going to have mandatory evacuations, everyone east of US 1 starting tomorrow morning. That'll be announced. The bridges will be open will start to close to westbound traffic at once the winds get up to 35 miles up to tropical storm force.
Yeah,
got it.
Miles an hour, yeah.
And you'll be able to get off the island still, but you won't be able to get back on. It's just really time to take this seriously and activate the plans that you've had all along.
Take this seriously. It's one of those things where, you know, a lot of people are hoping for the best but preparing for the worst. For those people, maybe your residents or maybe even neighboring cities who are thinking, oh, well, it's not going to be that bad.
Yeah, I'm worried about people who have been through some of the more recent storms where they kind of near miss and they're thinking that this is not going to be bad. This did take a turn. You got to activate your plans at this point. I know the people around here are really good. They're very prepared. They made all their plans, but now they have to follow through and activate those plans. Take it seriously. You don't know for sure what's going to happen. That thing is going to be sitting for like 24 hours over Grand Bahamas, and then we don't know exactly what it's going to do when it comes off. They say it's going to go north, but if it goes west, we're going to get a direct hit on the mainland, and people can't take the chance. Just prepare for the worst, and hey, if it doesn't happen, that's great, but don't be stuck in that situation where it does happen and it's coming towards us, and now you didn't prepare.
Right.
So that's my advice.
And some of the shelters that are open, are those working in conjunction with the county shelters as well?
Those are all county shelters.
All county shelters.
All county Indian River County shelters. The special needs shelter, 8 a.m. The rest at noon. There is a special shelter that's pet friendly. Yep. But if you don't know where you're going, you need to find out right now. It's in. They're all in schools here in the community, but it's all available on the Indian River County Emergency Management website.
Let's turn now and talk economic impact. You guys have had to close
Look
down
at this beautiful day in Vero Beach.
Yeah.
Remember this. Remember what it's like when you guys are thinking about your plans for Christmas or Thanksgiving break or bringing your kids down during spring break. It is really bad for business. All these restaurants along Ocean Drive here have been pretty much empty for the last couple of days, and it's going to be a few more days. Also, a lot of businesses, they have to still pay their employees, but they're not open for business, and so this is really devastating. We have our big manufacturer in town is Piper Aircraft, so if you're thinking of getting a private aircraft, think about Piper. Just remember Vero Beach after all this is over, and think about coming and visiting us. We really will appreciate it over the next year or two if we get people come for tourism.
For preparations, what will you be doing today and tonight and then into tomorrow?
Me personally?
Personally, but also for the city's sake.
For personally, we've actually done everything. I think most people in town have already done it. And actually, I've seen more people in the last couple of days walking around the beach because they don't have anything to do. The storm kind of slowed down. The city is just activating their plan. It's already been activated. Our police are on 12-hour shifts. Everything is being going according to plans, and these plans are all based on previous storms. So we know what we're doing. We've done all the things. Just listen. If the public listens and follows through, and if you're in a mandatory evacuation zone, now is the time. You're supposed to be leaving tomorrow morning when they make that official, and please do so.
Mayor, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate it. Wish you the best of luck in the days to come and the hours to come with Hurricane Dorian. Let's get inside now to meteorologist Carl Parker with expert analysis on Dorian. Carl.
All right, Tevin, thank you so much, and we're going to answer some questions right now.
Yeah, we know you've got questions, and they have been coming in, so we've got a few answers here. And our first question is one that's been on the minds of a lot of folks in the Florida Panhandle who's still suffering from the effects of Hurricane Michael. Mark Kroon wants to know, is it possible that the hurricane will continue to move westward against all odds?
Well, you know, it's a scary question, and when you look at the satellite picture and you see the westward motion there and how close it's going to get, you worry that, you know, is the hurricane capable of writing its own script at some point? But the modeling has overwhelmingly suggested that there will be a turn. So the larger question is, where is that turn going to occur? And, you know, I think we are going to see a northward turn at some point, but it could get really, really close before that happens. And in fact, the European model takes the very worst of the storm just to about the western end of Grand Bahama Island, so just about 60 to 70 miles perhaps east of South Florida. That is really, really close when you consider how strong the storm is.
All right, let's talk about the Bahamas. Next question, what do you think the highest sustained winds will be in Nassau?
Well, so right now what we've got is a very tight core. The area of strongest winds, you know, is probably about 20 miles across. And then after that, there is a drop off in those winds. So you look at the model forecast here, the very worst of it is going to be in Great Abaco Island, then moving to Grand Bahama Island, Nassau and New Providence Island to the south of that. So at this point, it looks like they're going to be in tropical storm force winds and maybe some hurricane force gusts.
What's better than one night of Olive Garden? How about two?
Troy. We are dealing with an extremely powerful and an unprecedented level hurricane.
That was some of the sights and sounds of Hurricane Dorian, 185 miles per hour. And this, you are looking at a monster of a storm on visible satellite, essentially a camera in space showing you with the use of the sunlight how big and how wide and how massive and how strong this storm is. A Category 5. Again, just barreling through right now the northwestern Bahamas. Eventually, it will move closer and closer towards the U.S. mainland, perhaps near the state of Florida. And that is what a lot of Floridians, a lot of people here, not just in the Sunshine State, but also across the south and east are watching. Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina, too, with Hurricane Dorian. And we, too, have our crews spread out, just as this storm is spreading out right now in South Carolina, in Georgia, in North Carolina, in the state of Florida, but also in the studio as well, in the Weather Channel headquarters with expert analysis you will only see here. So stay tuned as we cover this storm continuously, thoroughly for you at home as you're preparing for this storm. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten live for you in Vero Beach, Florida, where right now the downtown area is almost like a ghost town. Occasionally you have people on bikes and in cars, but right now it's almost quiet compared to what it would typically be during a Labor Day weekend. You see caution tape on on some sides of the streets, blocking off access to parking lots and businesses because these businesses are closed. In fact, Waldo's, a very famous restaurant, bar, and grill, they're supposed to have a charity event today. That is not ongoing. That event has been canceled, along with several other events for Labor Day weekend. In fact, they are shutting down the power and the gas at this business right around 3 o'clock. So as a lot of people are trying to perhaps figure out what else to do in downtown Vero Beach, Florida, I can assure you Waldo's is not open. Several other businesses, they have boarded up as well. Cotton Ways, Lily Pad, Allure, a fine gift and an art shop also closed. An ice cream shop is one business that is open right now, and they are planning to stay open for as long, they're actually closed now, I've been told. So they were planning to stay open for as long as possible, and we have figured out that long as possible is right now, because we are under hurricane watches here for Vero Beach, Florida, but also tropical storm warnings. And if you don't quite know the landscape here, let me explain this to you. This is a barrier island. If you go beyond 3 bridges that get you to the mainland, you actually have the Indian River separating the barrier island and the mainland. But in between those bridges, perhaps will close if tropical storm force winds do arrive 39 miles an hour or greater. That is certainly a possibility getting into tonight and into Monday as well. So for that reason, those bridges are They have a close eye on the bridges here in Vero Beach in Indian River County. We spoke to the emergency managers earlier today. They do anticipate closing those. They have shelters open for people who perhaps live on the barrier island and have to get off. They've got 6 ready to go tomorrow, one being a shelter for people with special needs, also a pet-friendly shelter, and then 4 additional shelters. Now that shelter for people with special needs, that opens tomorrow morning. The other shelters should open tomorrow at noon. Let's get to Savannah, Georgia right now, where they are also preparing for Hurricane Dorian. Let's bring in meteorologist Felicia Combs. Felicia.
Thanks a lot, Tevin. Yeah, they are. In fact, the Savannah College of Art and Design, that actually has an enrollment of about 10,000 students. They were supposed to be having their orientation, and they have canceled that because of Dorian and said they're going to wait until after September 9th. So putting that off for quite some time. That is a big deal. This is one of the bigger colleges here in Savannah. And then also we have Savannah State University. Now, that university is still kind of monitoring the storm to decide exactly what they're going to do, which I think is kind of, what everyone's doing. Everyone's monitoring Dorian to see exactly what is going to happen with that storm. Now, the Chatham Emergency Management Agency, they do have what they call a hurricane registry, and they are telling people who, might not have transportation or people who have medical issues, those people who really need a little bit of extra help when things like hurricanes hit, and you might be without power for your medical needs, or you might be without water that you need, or you might be without your medications. They're saying make sure you're registered on that hurricane registry, and the local government will make sure that you're somewhere safe. So they are.
Yeah, I certainly understand how the southeast coast is preparing. Again, people in Savannah, Georgia, getting ready. I'm sure those gas lines will be long in the hours to come. We actually do have Florida Governor, though, Ron DeSantis, standing by exclusively for us here on the Weather Channel to get you the latest information for those residents of the Sunshine State. Governor DeSantis, we spoke to you just a short time ago. Can we sort of talk now about the preparations that you guys have ongoing?
Absolutely. I had a video conference call about an hour ago with President Trump and key people in the federal administration. So they have all their assets mobilized for what they certainly understand is a historic storm. I mean, this storm, Dorian, just got upgraded to a Category 5 with now 185 mile per hour winds. And to put that in perspective, Hurricane Andrew in South Florida in '92, one of the biggest storms in Florida's history, was 165 mile an hour. Hurricane Michael, Category 5 last year that hit Florida's panhandle, was 160. So we've had one storm at that level hit Florida in our history, and that's all the way back in 1935 for the Labor Day hurricane, which reached 185 miles an hour. So this thing is a very, very ferocious storm. The track, although the track has it slightly offshore, that is obviously subject to a wobble here or wobble there. And so while everyone in Florida is hoping that it turns north prior to reaching our coast, our preparations are for an impact on Florida's coast. And so that's what our federal partners are doing. That's what we're doing at the state. And then that's what the local emergency officials are doing. Evacuations have been ordered in counties like Palm Beach and Martin. And you're going to continue to see that up and down the coast. And our message to Floridians is take action to protect yourself. If you're in an evacuation zone and you're ordered to evacuate, do it, because there's a good reason why you're being told to evacuate. This is not a storm that you want to take a chance with, and so you need to do what you can to protect yourself and your family.
And Governor DeSantis, you mentioned some of those FEMA resources. Is there a specific, or are there specific locations that you guys are targeting right now as a state to sort of maybe deploy resources or people to pre-stage for this event?
Well, sure. Well, FEMA has had resources pre-staged on the entire East Coast because, as you know, a few days ago, we thought that pretty much anywhere on the coast could be impacted. So what they're going to do is, as the storm moves north, assuming it does, they're going to have those assets following along to be able to support the impacted communities. You know, at the state level, you know, we have a lot of people staged in Central Florida simply because if you look from Palm Beach all the way to the North Florida, that allows us to get around. And then the power companies like Florida Power and Light, you know, they have people staged. They've got over, I think, 1,300 folks from out of state that have come in to be able to help with power restoration. And so they're throughout the coast, but you do have them, I think, congregated in some of the areas that could be hit the hardest. And so we're mindful of that. It's been a difficult storm because of the uncertainty for so many days. But, you know, one thing about this track is there's some uncertainty between whether it actually hits the coast or remains off. But we kind of got a good sense that, you know, if you're on the east coast of Florida, particularly Palm Beach north, you know, you're in a situation where, you know, you could face some significant impacts from this thing. So be ready. Yeah. And we're trying to have the assets follow where the threat is.
And Governor, for the people thinking...
And then we'll also be opening up the shoulder to allow for more traffic should that be necessary. Right now, we've not seen an abnormal amount of traffic, but we're constantly monitoring that, and we'll make those decisions if they're necessary to be able to help for a smooth evacuation.
And it's definitely a little bit too early to talk specific numbers, but do you know, or what's sort of been the feeling from a lot of the business leaders here throughout the Sunshine State and how they've taken an economic impact because of the Labor Day weekend that perhaps did not pan out as they hoped?
Well, obviously, I mean, you know, you're going to see that impact, but at the end of the day, you know, Florida's got a lot of great things going forward in terms of economic opportunities, and I think we'll be able to recover from those lost opportunities. The main thing for us is, you know, let's keep people safe. You know, people should take action to protect themselves, and trust me, we'll be hoping for the best on this thing. I mean, I this morning turned on the song from the Byrds, "Turn, Turn, Turn," because we'd like this storm to turn as soon as possible. But I can't take that to the bank, and I've got to prepare the state that it's not going to turn as early as we'd like, and so that's what we're doing. And we want everybody to just understand that Florida's still at risk of this thing.
Florida certainly still is at risk. Governor DeSantis, thank you so much. We appreciate you for your time, and we'll be checking back in with you periodically on the updates that you have as governor of the state of Florida. Let's get inside right now to Carl Parker, who is an expert meteorologist for us here at the Weather Channel. And Carl, what are you looking at right now? What key features are standing out to you with Dorian?
Well, I'll tell you, it's just one of the most intense tropical cyclones that we have seen in the Atlantic Basin, and I want to give you some perspective on this. When you look at this relative to other incredibly intense storms, it is number two, tied for two with Wilma and Gilbert in the Labor Day storm for the most intense Atlantic hurricanes on record by wind speed at 185 miles per hour. And also now number 6 for the lowest pressure at landfall in the Atlantic Basin. There are actually a couple there tied at number 2, so in the 5th slot, and pressure 911 at landfall. So this is a rare storm, but we certainly have seen an uptick in this in recent years. We've had 4 consecutive years with Category 5 hurricanes, and that too is a new record for the Atlantic Basin. So 185 mile per hour storm, Category 5, an incredibly dangerous storm, and we're just very concerned about when this turn is going to occur. You see, it's moving west now. It is slowing down as has been forecasted. This is the new advisory from the Hurricane Center. No change to the intensity, but it's moving west now at 7 miles per hour, so it has dropped slightly in terms of forward speed. Let's take a look at what's going on with the storm right now. And when you look at this, incredibly well-formed storm, there is no doubt just unspeakable violence occurring right now here on Great Abaco Island in the Bahamas. And we do have a crew here in the Bahamas. We're hoping to hear from them at some point. But right now, it is just probably just the worst weather imaginable right now in parts of Great Abaco Island. This is basically a 15-mile wide tornado that is occurring, and an intense one at that. There could be winds gusting to 200 miles per hour. There could be surge on the order of 20 feet or higher, and a lot of the islands are actually at an elevation of 15 feet. So you can only imagine how difficult it is there right now. Marsh Harbor, home to about 6,000 people, and our hearts going out to the people of the Northern Bahamas. We've never had a storm that strong in the northern Bahamas. So here's the forecast track and intensities. We do expect that the storm is gradually going to weaken as it gets over slightly cooler water working to the north. Again, we're looking for a turn to occur, but where exactly that occurs remains to be seen. And by no means are Florida impacts off the table at this point. And we could be looking at more direct impacts in North and South Carolina. There could be a landfall in North or South Carolina. And this is the European model. This is the run from last night. The new one is coming in right now. We should have that for you within the hour. And you see that it comes very, very close to South Florida. Perhaps the core of that storm within 50 to 60 to 70 miles from the coast. That's how close it is going to be. And then it's expected to begin that turn and work up and along the coast, but it is going to pound the coast as that happens, very similar to what Matthew did. And we could be talking about significant water level rises and a lot of wave action. And then after that, it is possible that that eye wall, that most dangerous eye wall, begins to actually come on shore in either South or North Carolina and then across the Outer Banks as well. And at that point, it's most likely going to begin to work out over the open water. So let's get out to Felicia Combs right now. And Felicia, this is just an awful, awful storm, and we can only hope that it does stay just a little bit offshore.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Yeah, that's right. The heightened awareness is going on for Dorian here, and we've got you covered on Dorian as the storm approaches.
Bear presents A Job Well Done. Painting be done.
Look at the strong wind. Look at the way the trees are blowing every which way in the wind, and then the debris down on the ground and the water sloshing up against the shoreline there and up against the seawall. We have seen a lot of videos coming out of the Bahamas, and we actually have a crew on the island, on Abaco Island, and we will bring you live signal when we can, when it is safe. Of course, it's not safe right now. In fact, the National Hurricane Center sent out a tweet earlier today that says, we have seen videos on the Abacos, people venturing out in the eye of Dorian. Everyone should take shelter immediately, as winds will increase rapidly and unpredictably after the eye passes. Already, winds have been close to 185 miles per hour, perhaps gusts closer to 200. So if you do have a way to communicate with your friends or family there, just send them a text, give them a phone call if you can, and let them know right now is not the best time to go out. Wait until after the storm passes, still shelter in place if you can. Let's get to Carl Parker right now in the lab on more. And actually, you have an interview, Carl, with the National Hurricane Center Director Ken Graham.
Yeah, Tevin, we continue to watch this incredible storm. Hurricane hunters actually reporting winds of 191 miles per hour. We'll see if that actually holds. And let's go out to the Director of the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham. And Ken, thank you so much for joining us once again. Can you put this storm into perspective for us? If this is an unbelievably intense storm, and it's just the type of storm that we do not see very often.
Yeah, some perspective, just a historical perspective here. I mean, you can see the eye right there. You know, some of the pictures that we're receiving, we saw the videos, and we absolutely want to remind people not to be outside in the eye, because you got the other eye wall on the way, and it could come in real quick. So some of the, I mean, think about this for a second. It ties the Labor Day storm in 1935 as the strongest storm to make landfall in the Atlantic Basin. So very historic storm, very dangerous, and we're really keeping an eye on this because, you know, you start looking at these impacts. It's not going away anytime soon. If you saw our track, they could get a good 30, 36 hours of some of these conditions over the Bahamas. So very, very dangerous.
So, you know, Ken, the sort of million-dollar question at this point is that of the stall and the turn. And how confident do you feel about the model guidance showing, pretty consistently showing that it will, in fact, turn to the north? But, you know, how close could it get to the coast? What's within the realm of possibility at this point?
And I think the big thing that we've continued to show is the cone. And I think what we need everybody to realize is, you know, so many things can happen at this stage. I mean, this is an unprecedented, very strong storm, and you're going to have it slow down, begin to turn, and you get little wobbles, little things happen when that happens. So anything in this cone, so you could literally get a track. This is the current forecast. But a little change could bring it really close to the coast, and a little more could even take it onshore. So you cannot rule out a landfall in Florida. You cannot rule out right along the coastline, or you can't rule out coming onshore and moving northward a little bit inland. So any one of those scenarios is a very dangerous situation because that's the high winds, it's the rain, and the dangerous storm surge.
And Ken, when we look farther down the road here, do you think that it's possible that we could be looking at a landfall in the Carolinas?
Yeah, it's interesting to look at the the extended forecast. You still see that cone. So if you extend that cone that we were talking about in Florida, and you start getting it into Georgia, South Carolina, and also North Carolina as well. So the extended forecast, we have time to watch it, but at the same time, that's 8 a.m. Wednesday. This is Thursday, and just off the chart there is Friday. So we're going to be watching this the entire week. But think about how susceptible the Georgia coast, South Carolina, North Carolina coast is to storm surge. That's a long period of time to be able to have those onshore winds. So you're going to have to really watch out for the storm surge, even up at the Carolinas.
And Ken, I know we had a landfall already at Elbow Cay. Was there a second landfall in the Bahamas?
Yeah, had a second one there hitting those islands, several different landfalls there. So we have to remind people, just stay out of the eye, just a dangerous situation. You got to make sure you're safe because the back end of that eye wall is on the way.
All right, Ken Graham, Director of the National Hurricane Center, thank you so much for your time, sir. I really do appreciate it. And again, you're looking at a storm that is historic in nature. We are talking about the storm that is tied for second place for the most intense hurricanes on record in the Atlantic Basin by wind speed at 185 miles per hour. And take a look at this satellite imagery. And, what you're looking at here is unimaginable violence. We're starting to get some of the pictures out of Marsh Harbor. People have actually been out in the eye, and we hope that they get to safe shelter once again, because it's going to be just as bad on the back side of the storm as that comes through, and very slowly coming through the Bahamas over the next 36 hours. And then it's going to begin to make that turn at some point on the western edge of Grand Bahama Island, probably 70 miles or so east of Florida. Much more in this dangerous storm coming up.
Discover new sand
structurally sound, but that remains to be seen. I'm holding on with my family here.
Yeah, that was a resident on Great Abaco Island giving a first-hand account of Hurricane Dorian, and this is what it looks like as Dorian is coming through. Look at those trees, look at those palm leaves going in the wind. You can see the waves crashing violently against the shore, and that's because the winds with this storm, 185 miles per hour. This is a beast of a storm, a Category 5. We actually have a crew on Abaco Island, but it is not safe for them to broadcast. So, of course, when it is safe for them to broadcast, we will bring this video and those interviews and those first-hand accounts as soon as we can. Stick with us here on the Weather Channel. Welcome back into Vero Beach. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten, and welcome into Side Cravings, an ice cream shop that has been here for 36 years. Mary Sue Walker, you know what hurricanes can do, and you are not taking anything for granted, and you're trying to play it safe, right?
Absolutely. Compressors and AC units, and going home and settling in.
You've already got the shutters up here. How's it going to be as you anticipate the arrival and you lock that door and you won't know what it looks like until a couple of days from now?
Well, we went through that with Francis. It was the only time that we actually left our home. And when we came back, the roof was off. So we anticipate a much better situation this time, as everybody in Vero Beach is well prepared, and their buildings are much stronger and the roofs are stronger. And we have plenty of shutters, so really if the roof goes, the building's going. So I don't anticipate that, but it's best to be safe and always over-prepare.
You had to gut this building previously after a hurricane came through. How's it been since that repair? You said it took 10 weeks. You're back. What are you hoping for now?
Well, I'm hoping that this is going to go by us, and as soon as the power is back on, we'll be open the next day. We're ready.
We are ready. They're certainly ready here on the barrier island of Vero Beach. Mary Sue, thank you so much. Let's get you inside right now to Nick Walker, where Nick, this hurricane has made a second landfall in Marsh Harbor.
Yeah, and we're continuing to watch its progress, but the progress is going to slow way down through the Bahamas. It's going to take a while before we see it move toward Florida. Maybe by Tuesday, we could begin to see the possibility of hurricane-force winds here on the Florida beaches. This is why we have a hurricane watch in effect here, basically from north of Deerfield Beach to the border between Volusia and Brevard counties. This includes Melbourne, Vero Beach, and West Palm Beach. So right there where Tevin is, under a hurricane watch as well as a storm surge watch. This is an area where we could see a water rise over the normal high tide levels. Now, they've got the king tides going on in many portions of Florida here this weekend, some of the highest tides of the year, and that is going to just add to the misery possibilities here. Right now, no storm surge, nothing over normal high tides at the moment, but Dorian is still well off toward the east. It will continue to make its move, and as it does, we're going to see heavy rainfall. The European model puts maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain right there along the shorelines of Florida, 5 to 8 inches up into South and North Carolina, but the U.S. model has as much as a foot of rain in North Carolina. Well, let's head over toward Felicia Combs. She's in Savannah right now. And of course, folks making their preparations there because, you know, even though Georgia doesn't have as much of a history of seeing hurricanes on the coast, this one's going to get close.
Yeah, too close for comfort. And they know all too well from Matthew and Irma what can result when a storm gets a little too close for comfort here. I've been speaking with people, and a lot of people are making their preparations. In fact, I spoke with 2 women, 2 friends who said their husbands are deployed, and so they're trying to work together to make sure they're getting everything prepared and ready for Dorian.
I'm here visiting my friend, and just knowing that she's going to be here by herself in the house, trying to get the water and the flashlights and the batteries and make sure that she has everything she needs in case she's here by herself without power or water.
And, you know, sometimes that's something you don't think about, the people who have maybe loved ones deployed, so they're down a hand that would be typically helping them prepare. So, you know, reach out to your neighbors, see if they need any help. This is the time to be doing that. And, of course, here at the Weather Channel, we will be continuing with our in-depth coverage of Dorian, and we're back with more after the break.
You're a big deal to us.
Can this storm get any stronger? Is that a possibility?
Well, you know, I suppose it could. I would never want to say never, but it's already tied at number 2 for the most intense Atlantic hurricanes on record by wind speed. So, you know, it's way, way up there. You'd think that it would be peaking at this point.
Just amazing. And that is a good question, and actually one that we've been getting. Hashtag hurricane questions to send your questions in. We want to share with you some of the questions we've been getting and answer them for you. This is from Jim Bramhall. He says, please tell me what you think West Palm Beach and Port St. Lucie, Florida will get. We have family there. We're so worried. Yeah, obviously a lot of folks are worried for family in those areas.
Yeah, so, you know, the modeling has been very consistent about the idea of the storm, you know, getting up to the western edge of Grand Bahama Island, then, you know, gradually starting to turn more to the north. So, you know, we've had a fair amount of modeling showing that. Now, I will say that the models are not infallible.
Sure.
And especially with such a powerful storm, there's some potential that it could write its own script. So there is some potential that it could be worse than what we're forecasting right now. This right now is the reasonable worst case scenario where you've got hurricane force winds in coastal areas of Palm Beach County and getting up into Martin County and St. Lucie, Indian River, and then Brevard. So, you know, right now that appears to be the worst case scenario. But again, if there is some shift in the track, that could change things dramatically.
Yeah, know your evacuation zone and evacuate if told to by local authorities. All right, here's another question. Why do eye wall replacement cycles occur? This is a good one. And should people expect this phenomenon from Dorian? We hear about these in other tropical systems.
Yeah, you know, it's a fairly common thing with hurricanes. And what happens is you've got this eye wall right in here, and sometimes a secondary eye wall begins to develop. And that secondary eye wall, you can see a little bit of indication of that right in there. Sometimes that secondary eye wall will begin to cut off the flow of warm and humid air to the inner eye wall. And at that point, the inner eye wall begins to degrade and eventually can collapse. And then the secondary eye wall takes over and can then contract some. But what happens in that case typically is that the intensity comes down. When you lose that inner eye wall, you lose some of the intensity of the storm. But at the same time, the area of strongest winds also expand. So it may be, if we were to see that it's not as strong of a storm in terms of the upper end of the intensity, but that the winds are stronger over a much larger area, which would have a big impact coming very close to Florida. Maybe more of that strong wind getting into Florida.
Good point. And right now, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of that occurring with the
Well, you know, there is a little
you're seeing
bit.
it.
Yeah, we're seeing a secondary eye wall right in there. You know, I'm not seeing any degradation of the inner eye wall at this point, but we are seeing a little bit of an outer ring there. So it will be interesting to watch in the next several hours.
All right, all right. Okay, we've got some new video we've got to show you. This is from Abaco Islands in the Bahamas. This is an area that was seeing the eye wall move in earlier. This flooding is just incredible here. You know, and really, I guess we can say this is not terribly surprising to see this kind of effect. You know, we were only imagining what the effects would be as we saw the eye wall move into the Abaco Islands, but now we're getting visual proof.
This is just awful. This is where our crew is in the Bahamas and on Great Abaco Island. And as soon as they're safe, they're going to try to get some more back to us. But, you know, the thing that's going on here is you've got an elevation on a lot of these islands of about 15 feet and then a storm surge of up to 20 feet. So you're talking about widespread inundation. And then on top of that, these winds, you know, probably gusting 160, 170, 180 miles per hour. I mean, that is just a horrifying situation to be in.
It really is. The waves on top of the surge. That just was amazing. And of course, battering waves, that's just going to cause more damage too, in addition to the water rise. And some of these islands, as you mentioned, are even, you know, less than 15 feet. And so probably a lot of islands, the smaller ones, are going to be covered.
Just an awful situation there. We're going to have much more on this terrible hurricane coming up in just a moment.
Well, it finally happened, Zachary. Somebody burned down my she shed.
Nobody burned down.
Waiting to see some of these images that we're seeing out of the Bahamas, Carl.
Felicia, just an awful situation in the Bahamas there. We're looking at potential of storm surge over 20 feet, and you've got elevations on many of those islands at around 15 feet. So you're going to be talking about widespread inundation there. Now, a lot of this video taken in the eye itself as people had a moment to get out and see just how bad the damage was. But now the back edge of that eye wall coming back into Marshtown there in the Bahamas. And so it's just an awful, awful situation. This is the worst storm that has ever hit the northern part of the Bahamas, the worst storm that has ever hit the northern Bahamas in the record. And take a look at the latest on the storm now, 185 mile per hour, category 5. You know, we had some people say, well, I wish I hadn't have spent money on those hurricane supplies now, living down here in South Florida. Well, just look at this image for a minute and think about that. Think about regretting whether or not you've started to prepare for a hurricane. You've got what is now the second most intense hurricane on record by wind speed in the Atlantic Basin, tied with a few other storms. So tied at number two most intense hurricane by wind speed in the record in the Atlantic Basin, now moving west and towards South Florida. And we think it is going to stall, and we think it is going to turn. But wow, is this a close call? It is going to continue to be a close call. It's a very good thing that you have prepared, because the models are good, but they're certainly not infallible. And we cannot rule out more direct impacts in Florida at this point. I want to take a closer look at what's going on the satellite picture here, and also again show you number 2 on the list of most intense Atlantic hurricanes, tied with tied with Wilma, Gilbert, and the Labor Day hurricane. And that is at 185 miles per hour. That is by wind speed. So here is the satellite picture, and you can see the storm slowly moving into Great Abaco Island. Incredibly well-formed eye and eye wall. And again, a number of people got out there in Marsh Harbor, and they were taking video as the eye was passing overhead. Now the back edge, the southwestern part of the eye wall, is coming in once again. So now it's going to be another prolonged period period of unspeakable violence there. You're talking about tornado-like winds going on for a very long period of time because this storm is moving so slowly, and it's going to continue to slow over the next 24 to 36 hours. It's only going to move into Grand Bahama Island over the next 36 hours. And as it stops and stalls and then begins to turn to the north, we think it's going to be very close to the western edge of Grand Bahama Island, maybe about 70 miles away. So think about that. The western edge of this storm, the very worst of the storm, maybe 60 to 70 miles away from South Florida. 60 to 70 miles. That's how close it's going to be. And that's assuming that it behaves the way that we think it will. This is a look at the wind coming across the Bahamas very slowly through the day tomorrow and then into Tuesday as well. A prolonged period of incredibly intense wind there in Freeport, along with storm surge, and then the storm begins to lift up. Now, I want to show you the wind field, as we call it. That's the area of strong winds relative to the forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. And by the way, we're going to get a new advisory coming up at 5 o'clock. And so we think the area of strongest winds, the hurricane force winds, if it were to follow that track, would be about 20 miles offshore, about 20 miles offshore. Well, at that point, at 48 hours, the average track error is about 70 miles. So the average error is more than 3 times that distance, which says to you that it is entirely possible that the storm tracks a little farther to the west and that we get into more of those hurricane force winds, and the storm is still going to be exceptionally intense at that time. Even if the storm is beginning to weaken at that time, it is now a 185 mile per hour storm. So, imagine if it comes down by 40 miles per hour, it's still an incredibly intense storm. So if that eye wall were to get anywhere near the coast there, you'd be talking about a radically different situation. So it's going to be such a close call. Right now, the reasonable worst case scenario suggesting that we could get into hurricane force winds in coastal areas of Palm Beach County and into Martin County, St. Lucie County, Indian River County, and up into Brevard County as well. So we could get hurricane force winds in those areas. But again, if we do see a track that is a little farther to the west, that is radically going to change things. A little bit of deviation to the west is going to have a huge impact in terms of who gets what. And that's why there are hurricane watches now up in those islands. And there are also tropical storm warnings and watches. Tropical storm warning, Palm Beach County, also into Martin County, St. Lucie, Indian River County, and tropical storm watches that extend much farther inland, right across the turnpike there into Okeechobee and over into Lakeland, almost up into Orlando as well. So let's talk about the longer term here for this storm. And right now, the best guess is that the core of the storm, the most dangerous part of the storm, is going to be just offshore. But again, we cannot rule out more direct impacts in Florida. But then at that point, it is more possible that we see more direct impacts or even a landfall in South and North Carolina. So those of you in those areas from, say, Charleston into Myrtle Beach, into Wilmington, in the Outer Banks, you've got to be on high alert for a possible very strong hurricane, a weakening one, but a very strong hurricane coming your way in those areas. Let's get back out to Felicia now.
Thanks a lot, Carl. And a lot of people are comparing Dorian and this latest track forecast to that forecast on Matthew. I can tell you, speaking from personal experience, I was in West Palm Beach, Florida, when Matthew was in the forecast, when Matthew was heading toward that area, and everyone was really bracing for the impact. And then Matthew ended up skirting the coast of Florida and eventually making landfall in the Carolinas and really just doing a ton of destruction, even along the Florida coast, here in Savannah and the coastal Carolinas, just from simply even riding along the coast. And I think that's why everyone's ears are really perking up with this current forecast of Dorian. So what are you seeing that you think are kind of similarities between the two?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, if it were to follow the track that the European model is suggesting, it would be very, very close to the track of Matthew. And because it is such a powerful storm, it might do a lot of the same things that Matthew did. Matthew, for example, caused a terrific amount of storm surge. There was a 5-foot surge there around Jacksonville Beach. And then we also had very high water levels coming on the rivers, the St. Johns River coming into Jacksonville, because you had a lot of heavy rain that was trying to run out to the ocean. At the same time, water's being pushed in by the storm. And then we had very high storm surge up into parts of the Georgia coast and up into South Carolina. So I think all of those things are on the table. I think if you look back to what happened in Matthew, if you went through Matthew in those areas in northeast Florida or in Georgia, South Carolina, we could be looking at a very similar situation in this case, and maybe a similar intensity as well. The storm is expected to gradually weaken as it lifts north, because we're going to be getting to slightly cooler water. The wind shear is going to be increasing a little bit, so it's probably not going to be the monster that it is now. But I think, yes, I think what happened with Matthew could be a very close analog to what we see from this storm.
And Carl, I think another point to make is this storm is just moving so slowly. So that's another thing that people are worried about. Those slow moving storms just drop so much rain and really build up that storm surge. So I think that also has a lot of people's ears perking up here all along the southeast coast. So, definitely something that people are preparing for here in Savannah. Tybee Island just right down the road, dealing with high tides, king tides as well. We actually have a coastal flood advisory in effect for the shore of Tybee Island and portions of Chatham County as we head into the overnight hours, because it's already dealing with a high tide. You put the king tides in there, and we're getting the possibility of a foot of inundation of salt water coming on shore. Of course, now Highway 80 going out to Tybee Island, that does kind of flood regularly just with the tide cycles anyways, but especially with the king tides, with this extra rush of swell that's getting pushed toward the coast already from Dorian, even being so far away. This is impacting places like Tybee Island, up into Hilton Head, with the high risk of rip currents. We've got red flag warnings for that area. So lots of different things, lots of different impacts already happening. And not only here, but we also have people who are traveling and trying to get out of tropical watches and things in Florida right now. We actually have Dave Malkoff in Orlando, where he spoke with some travelers who are trying to get out of the path of Dorian.
This major hurricane and the on-again, off-again closure of the airport here in Orlando has caused many people to change their plans on this holiday weekend.
They had to change our flight to today, September 1st, so we had to leave 2 days early.
I just am kind of sad because I was going to Disney World for about 4 or 3 days, and then we only ended up going for 2 days.
We weren't sure what was going to happen, so to play it safe, we decided to come a day early.
We don't know if there's going to be a flood or not a flood, so that's why we're going home, for nobody can get hurt from our family.
My parents live in Melbourne, and we're from Michigan, and we were down visiting them.
We decided that we were going to all stay home and help close the shutter things.
But if I hadn't changed a flight for today, I might not have gotten out, because the airport was supposed to close for tomorrow morning. So my girlfriend also was supposed to fly with me, and her airline had no availability for yesterday or today, so I had to drive her to Tampa. We had to rent a car just to take her all the way to Tampa.
I was able to change my flight, no problems, and I'm glad to hopefully be back in Chicago this afternoon.
Last year, 126 million people came to Florida from out of the area, and right now, a lot of those people are scrambling to get home. In Orlando, Dave Malkoff, the Weather Channel.
And with millions of people already under those tropical watches in the U.S., travel is not going to get any easier, especially as we have more evacuation orders issued as well. So go ahead and make those plans as soon as you can. For now, we're going to send it back over to Nick with what we know, the latest on Dorian. Nick.
All right. Thanks so much, Felicia. Here is what we know right now about Dorian in the Bahamas. Hundreds of people are hunkered down in schools and churches to ride out the life-threatening effects of Dorian. It's now the strongest hurricane on record for the northwestern Bahamas. In Florida, Brevard County will open shelters today at 5 p.m. Spectrum opens 32,000 free Wi-Fi hotspots from Volusia County to Pinellas County, Florida. All right, we talked about the worst-case scenario of seeing those hurricane-force winds perhaps on the coast of Florida. This is it in terms of probabilities, and a 90% probability here that we're going to see tropical storm force winds, at least on the coast, and even over into northern and western portions of the state. We still have chances of seeing those tropical storm force winds. We're finding the onset probably coming in long about tomorrow as the day goes by. And then as we get farther toward the north, we'll begin to see more of those tropical storm force winds coming in Tuesday morning around, say, Melbourne, Jacksonville Tuesday evening, and then on up to Charleston by the time we get into Wednesday, Wilmington, North Carolina by Thursday.
Wide view here, and what we're seeing right there is the second most intense hurricane on record in the Atlantic Basin by wind speed, tied with 3 other storms. Second most intense on record by wind speed in history in the Atlantic Basin. Now, that storm is 150 miles to the east of South Florida, and it's now moving west. If this had been a few decades ago, we'd be talking about a whole different situation, but we're relying on all this computer model guidance, which is saying, yes, it is going to turn. Yes, it is going to make its way up the coast. And I'll show you the brand new run of the European model, which has been actually very consistent in the last 24 hours. Just unspeakable, unimaginable violence occurring in the Bahamas right now as we speak. We could see winds gusting over 200 miles per hour with this storm. Storm surge on the order of 20 feet or higher for these low-lying islands. There's also a lot of very warm water underneath around the Bahamas, and there's a lot of depth to that warmth as well. So a lot of energy under the surface of the ocean, and that is going to continue to feed this thing, continue to fuel it for quite some time as it slowly just crawls across the islands. This is going to be so devastating because it's going to be such a long duration event. There you see we're going into tomorrow morning, and you've got those winds coming into Freeport there, Grand Bahama Island, and then we go into Tuesday, and that is Tuesday morning, and we're still seeing those incredibly strong winds. And at this point, the storm is probably, the worst of the storm is probably 50 to 60 to 70 miles offshore relative to South Florida. That's how close to a disaster in the U.S. we are going to come to here in parts of Florida, although we still could be looking at some terrible impacts in the Carolinas. And then you see the storm beginning to turn and coming up along the coast. And again, we're relying on these computer models, but a little bit of a change, a small deviation off to the west here could be a very different story for Florida and areas upstream. We'll talk more about that coming up.
This was me 6 years ago. And this is me now. I got Liberty Mutual.
You know, they might be in Florida right now, but they can be deployed to wherever they need to be. These guys are in it for the long haul, and they're absolutely no strangers to, you know, what it takes to get that power back on, which is such a critical lifeline for so many people. You know, it's a nuisance thing, one, where you want your AC, you want your water, you want all of your electronics back, but it's also a matter of life or death for some people who need, you know, certain medical instruments and things like that. That could be the difference between life and death, and that's why these power crews really out there putting in that work. So here in the Savannah area, especially in Tybee Island, people are getting out and preparing, but also helping each other. Video of people putting sand in the sandbags to help prevent some of the flood waters if they do happen to rise from getting into businesses or getting into their homes. And that's how people are preparing. So they're getting their sandbags, they're getting their water. And we spoke with one woman who said, you know, this is the time where everyone is just trying to help each other. It's something that they know all too well how to do here around the Tybee Island area.
We're gathering sandbags for friends, neighbors. So many came in without sandbags. I bought extra yesterday and just helping. It's just the thing to do. It's Tybee way.
And such an important thing there. You just want to make sure that you are checking on your neighbors and helping them out as much as you can. So I'm here live in Savannah. We're going to get it over to Carl right now with the latest the latest information on Hurricane Dorian forecast.
Yeah, Felicia, we did get a 4 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, and no change to the intensity of the storm, a 185 mile per hour Category 5 storm. That makes it the second most intense in Atlantic Basin history, tied with 3 other storms by wind speed. Second most intense in Atlantic Basin history by wind speed. That is a remarkable stat right there. It's now moving west at 7 miles per hour. very scary there across certainly the Bahamas, but also in South Florida, because we do expect that it is going to slow down and begin to turn to the north. But the big question is, when exactly is that going to occur? Now, I want to show you the visible satellite imagery, and we're getting a really good look at the structure of this thing. There is just so much power showing up there. You can see this eye very, very clearly in that eye wall. This being the eye wall, you see the striations in the eye wall right in there. That's where winds could be gusting to 200 miles per hour. And we're talking about just incredible violence and an awful, awful storm for the Bahamas. And it's going to continue to be over the next 36 hours. It's going to take that long for it to move over to the western end of Grand Bahama Island, right around Freeport. It's going to be a very long duration event in Freeport, and it's going to get so close to South Florida. This is how tricky of a forecast this has been. This is the latest run of the European model, which is generally a very reliable model, and it seems to be settling in at this time, showing that very slow motion across the Bahamas, but then it gets so close to the U.S. coast. This is by Tuesday morning. The worst of the storm, probably 50 to 60 to 70 miles offshore. So a little bit of a deviation to the west could make a very big difference in terms of how much impact we see in Florida. Storm then continues up, perhaps along the coast, and then because it's going to move up and towards the northeast, while the coast of the Carolinas is more east-northeast oriented, we could be looking at a landfall or very nearly so in South Carolina and North Carolina between Thursday and Friday, and then the storm works out over the open water. So here's a look at the ensemble guidance from the European model. Still a lot of the members largely offshore. This is when we put it all together. This is confidence in the ensembles here. And so you see that the medium confidence is generally a little offshore, but that's really, really close to the coast. It is still entirely possible that we see direct impacts in Florida, and certainly possible as you get up towards the Carolinas. We'll have much more on this dangerous storm coming up in a moment.
Everyone loves the benefits of compression socks, but they're just...
but we're not out of the woods yet.
That was the Florida Governor, Ron DeSantis, and giving the latest update on exactly what Florida is planning as Hurricane Dorian does edge closer to that state. All across the southeast, we are preparing. I actually spoke to Mayor Deloach of Savannah a little bit earlier, and he said that the emergency management officials and the city are all continuously meeting and trying to decide exactly when to possibly decide if people are going to evacuate or what they're going to be doing in this area. Now, one thing's for sure, people are preparing in the Tybee Island area. People are filling up those sandbags and getting prepared for the possibility of some flooding. And that's, of course, what we like to see. We like to see people getting prepared, even if we're not exactly 100% sure where. Take a break for the riverboat horn there. And we actually spoke to someone who's
evacuating. We've had some others over the years, but not to the degree that we're having here of recent. So it's concerning, but we are prepared.
And, you know, I think that's about right. People here are concerned, but they are prepared. In fact, it's Labor Day weekend. One of the things that Savannah is well known for, the riverboats. People love to get out on the riverboats. And, you know, no official decisions on when they might stop that service, but that's definitely one of the big draws here in Savannah. But those are one of the industries that would be impacted by some of the evacuations or some of the deteriorating weather as we head into Tuesday and Wednesday of this holiday weekend. So we are waiting for the latest update, the 5 p.m. advisory, but for now we're going to get to Carl with the latest on Hurricane Dorian.
That 5 o'clock advisory, and in the meantime, we want to show you some of the video that has come out of Great Abaco Island in the Bahamas, and just unimaginable violence here. You know, this storm, for all intents and purposes, is basically like a 20-mile wide tornado. You're talking about winds that are of tornado strength, and so that's the sort of magnitude of damage that you're looking at here. Roofs torn off, structures severely damaged. You can see lumber and parts of that structure just tossed about everywhere. Looks very much like tornado damage, and we've seen many, many videos like this. In addition to the incredible winds, we were also looking at a surge that may have been on the order of 20 feet plus, which is a really big deal in low-lying islands. And I believe that this video was taken in the eye of the storm, which slowly passed overhead. So they had a moment to go out and see what had happened, and then had to face the back side of the storm, another very long period of incredibly intense winds there with this storm. Just an awful storm in the Bahamas, the worst storm, the most intense hurricane we have ever seen in the record in the northern part of the Bahamas. The second most intense Atlantic hurricane on record, tied with 3 other storms. And we are now awaiting the new advisory from the Hurricane Center. It's not quite in yet. Still looking at a Category 5 storm, 185-mile-per-hour winds, a very scary loop there as it makes its way towards Florida. And just look at the intensity of this storm as it is now coming through the Abaco Islands, making its way towards Grand Bahama Island, and it's only very slowly going to be moving through. And the worst of this storm, the eye wall of the storm on the western side, only now about 145 miles away from South Florida. It's probably going to close that distance by half, get to somewhere around 60 to 70 miles towards the western end of Grand Bahama Island, and then it is slowly going to begin to work to the north. Now, this is a look at the model forecast showing you how that may happen. This is going into Tuesday early morning. Look how close that storm is going to be if it happens just like this. The model guidance has been fairly consistent on this point about the idea of it stopping and then taking a right turn and moving up and along the coast. But we're going to have to watch this carefully, because certainly that could change, and just a little bit of a deviation in the path could dramatically raise the stakes for Florida and other states that are farther to the north. So this is the best guess right now. We're very close to it. Again, we're waiting the new advisory, a new track forecast from the Hurricane Center. We should have that by the top of the hour. So right now, the worst case scenario is that we do see hurricane force winds in some parts of the east coast of Florida, from Palm Beach County up into Martin County, St. Lucie, also into Indian River County, and then into Brevard County as well. In all of those areas, hurricane force winds are possible. That's why hurricane watches are up in these areas. Tropical storm watches, also tropical storm warnings as well. Now, these are the ensemble tracks from the European model, and so they're still showing what may be an offshore track, but it is also possible that we'll see a track that is along the coast or even on the coast, particularly up into the Carolinas. An incredibly dangerous storm, and our team coverage is going to continue at the top of the hour right here on the Weather Channel.
You wouldn't accept an incomplete job from anyone else. Why?
Hurricane warnings for the state of Florida. And this now an indication of the threat that this massive storm poses here to the United States, to the mainland United States. Right now, it is the Bahamas that is getting absolutely clobbered by this monster, this beast of a storm. We've been watching this for days, and unfortunately, we now have days to go. Again, now with the 5 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, getting word that there are now hurricane warnings for parts of Florida. We're going to detail that coming up and talk about the latest from the National Hurricane Center as we track this massive, frankly, scary storm that is lurking just offshore. We have you covered here at the Weather Channel with team coverage, expert analysis like only the Weather Channel can bring you. We have meteorologist Mike Bettis at the Weather Channel, and I'm meteorologist Chris Warren here in Jacksonville, Florida, where we're right along the St. Johns River, and we have seen in the past with storms how bad the flooding can be here in Jacksonville, how bad the flooding can be from storm surge, from heavy rain, and also the potential for some very strong winds. And that is all on the table still as we look at the forecast, the possibility where this storm is going to go. This still does include Florida, also including Georgia, South and North Carolina, not out of the woods. The trend has been for the forecast models to be going offshore, but with some wobble back closer to Florida. So at this hour, there is still a lot we don't know. What we do know is that there is a beast of a storm, one of the strongest we have ever seen on record, just a matter of miles offshore from Florida. Right now, raking over the Bahamas, a very scary situation right now. And we do have crews there, and when it is safe and when it is possible
to get reports. We are going to do our best to hear from those crews to give you an idea of what it's like for those who stayed and decided to ride out this monster of a hurricane, a Category 5 hurricane that is threatening still millions of people. Again, hurricane warnings have been posted for parts of Florida, and we're going to watch and see how and if more areas will end up under hurricane warnings, and it certainly is a possibility as this storm moves closer and closer. When you look at the enormity of this thing, you can really get a sense of just how massive it is, and the fact that it's not moving very fast and it is still moving off to the westerly direction. We are expecting that northerly turn, but it's going to take some time. And as it does move closer to Florida, we are going to be dealing with potentially a lot of multiple impacts here to Florida and then eventually Georgia, possibly South Carolina and North Carolina. Let's go now to meteorologist Mike Bettis. And Mike, when we look at this, it is just awe-inspiring and scary to look at this storm. And I think that's one of the things about hurricanes. The more symmetrical and frankly, the more beautiful they look, that beautiful round circles, the scarier and more dangerous they actually are.
It's so true, Chris. And this thing has taken on in the last, say, 2 days, a really, really frightening look to it meteorologically, right? Everything is perfectly symmetrical on this. You know, it's a complete donut here. And even the eye itself and the eye wall are completely linear, if you will. Everything is just, there's no raggedness to it whatsoever. And so this has, I mean, truly it has no imperfections, if you will, when it comes to the meteorological world. But the winds right now, 185 miles per hour with the newest advisory that came in here at 5 o'clock. It's crawling along here, folks, moving at just 5 miles per hour. So unfortunately, it's really unloading right now on the Bahamas. Abaco Island being hit and being hit hard right now. This is Abaco Island right in here. I'm going to circle it for you. It's that island right there. Literally, we have hundreds of islands through the Bahamas. We have several large ones that are inhabited. And then this right here, that is Grand Bahama Island where Freeport is. That'll be next in line to be hit here. But again, when you're moving along at just 5 miles per hour, we are going to be in the thick of this for a very long time here in the Bahamas. And I fear that it may be catastrophic damage for us here. And I kind of get this sense that from here going forward, that people in Bahamas refer to, time before the hurricane and then after the hurricane. You just kind of have that moment in time, and this may be their moment in time, unfortunately. You look at these winds, still forecast by tomorrow afternoon to be intense, 165 miles per hour, to still be a Cat 5 at that time. Then going into Tuesday, 145, and again, the wind speed all the way through Thursday still maintains Category 2 strength here. It's an incredible storm. There is no question about that. It's gotten larger in size too, by the way, and size does matter when it comes to hurricanes here, but we were talking about the almost a perfect, just a perfect meteorological conception, if you will, of a hurricane. This is it. I mean, this is what you would see. It is completely circular here, a perfect 360-degree eye here. The eye itself, the winds that extend out from the center, go out about 45 miles. The hurricane force winds here, okay? So you're talking, in essence, about a 90-mile wide EF4 tornado, if you will, just raking through the Bahamas right now. Most recent landfall over Marsh Harbor. That's a look at the radar coming from Miami right now. And then we widen this out. You can see we are not that far here, folks, from Florida. How far away are we? I'll put the little measurement on here. Watch this. We'll measure from the center of the eye here, okay? We'll measure from the center of the eye. I'm going to put a little marker on there. And this is not very far. There to West Palm is only about 160 miles. That's it. That's all we're talking here, folks. So it's getting closer and closer. And Chris, what that means is it won't be that much longer. Yes, we're moving along slowly here, but we're already starting to see some of the bands come through Florida right now. It won't be that much longer before we anticipate some at least tropical storm force winds here, and we're going to start the ocean now swelling into the Florida coastline here. So it's something certainly to consider ourselves lucky at this point. We haven't had to deal with much, and we've been preparing, Chris, for days now. So hopefully we're ready for it, but now the big show begins, and once it exits the Bahamas, next target will be Florida, then Georgia, then the Carolinas.
Mike, I want to talk about that target, the target for Florida. Now, something's going to happen, right? Whether it is best case scenario, rough surf, massive beach erosion, heavy rain, and some strong winds. worst case scenario, this storm continues its westward track, which when you look at the forecast cone is still a possibility. I mean, we have to really kind of take this day by day, don't we? Because as of right now, the storm is moving toward Florida, and within the cone, the left side of the cone, it's possible the center could still go outside of that, which would be a direct landfall in Florida.
We can't with 100% certainty say that Florida is out. It's not. The most likely scenario is that it stays offshore, at least the center does, but it's going to be very, very close call. We believe we're expecting this northerly turn. That's putting a lot of faith in the computer models, right? This is how we forecast. These are human-created math equations, if you will. And this is how we forecast. And we're doing everything we can with hurricane hunters, with weather balloons, to continuously update our computer models and give people the most accurate forecast we can. But still within the realm of possibility is Florida. You look at this, hurricane wind speed probabilities somewhere in maybe the 40 to 50 percentile range here, right at the coastline, okay? So we do have warnings now, tropical storm warnings there, Vero Beach down toward Boca Raton, tropical storm watches that go farther inland. So even if you're just not right at the coast, you're going to feel the effects even farther inland. There we go. Tropical storm force wind speed probabilities, a little bit different here though. Look at how much higher the probabilities are now, even going up to the Georgia and Carolina coast here. We're talking now on the east coast of Florida, 90% chance that we get tropical storm force winds. What are we dealing with right now? Not much, but look through time now. Again, it's going to be a slow process, and look where the center of this goes, just paralleling the coast. And for the most part, most of us, at least the current forecast here, Chris, should anticipate tropical storm force winds. Could we get gusts higher than that? Could we see sporadic damage?
I'm going to ask Mike another question.
It's very possible that that happens, and you take a look at how the atmosphere wants to react here. What's steering it? What's pushing it? High pressure's been pushing it westbound, okay? That high pressure relaxes just a little bit, and what happens is we're going to end up getting a pretty solid trough. Do you see these white arrows in here that are animating? We're going to get a pretty solid trough in here that picks this thing up and pulls it northbound here. That happens as early as tomorrow night, okay? And then pulling it north and then maybe paralleling the coast. That is the European model. This is the GFS model. Does something very similar. You can see the trough in here. The little subtle details, though, Chris, we can't outline for you. Could there be, I mean, truly a shift 25 miles one way or the other could make a huge difference for these coastlines. And so don't always concentrate on the dead center of the cone. It could vary. It could wobble within that. So if you're prepared, you're going to be ready for this, for anything that may come your way. But I can't, at least at this point, and nobody should be telling you that Florida is out of the woods. They're not yet.
Mike, I want to speak another point to this uncertainty. You were talking about the forecast models and how those math equations are put in by people. But part of forecasting in general is you look at the past and what has happened in the past. Now, when we look at a storm like this is up there. I mean, we don't have a lot of storms that are Category 5 over the Bahamas with this exact same scenario to look at. So when you see something that could be considered historic, it makes it that much more difficult to try to predict how this storm is going to react this close to Florida.
Undoubtedly a historic hurricane for the Bahamas. There's no question about that. We've not had a hurricane of this intensity hit the Bahamas before. Maybe we can give people some historical context, though, here, Chris. You remember just a couple of years ago, we had Hurricane Matthew, okay? I'm going to put on here Dorian's center line in that cone, okay? That's what you see here that's highlighted in red. Take a look at Matthew from 3 years ago. Look at how close those forecasts, that for our forecast, current forecast, and the historical track of Matthew were. If you go back, folks, you remember Matthew, and you live along the east coast of Florida, remember what happened here. That was a Category 4 storm paralleling the coast here. The beaches got absolutely destroyed. We had a lot of coastal flooding. We had a ton of beach erosion, Chris. We had, right at the coastline at least, a solid amount of wind damage. So at least let that at this point be your starting point. Okay, could this be something similar to Matthew? Yes, it could with this current forecast track. But again, small deviations, west or east, can make a difference. But I would say at this point, if you remember back to Matthew, treat Dorian similarly. Although the one caveat here, Chris, is it's a much more intense hurricane right now than Matthew was. It is forecast to weaken as it pulls past Florida, but it's a beast right now, 185-mile-per-hour hurricane, which the Bahamas has never felt before.
And we're still talking about the potential of a hurricane. We were talking, Mike, and you were making great points about how Florida certainly has to pay attention to this because it is possible there could be a landfall. Yes, that might not be the most likely, but I think, if anything, over my shoulder here, a reminder that it's football season. There's supposed to be a college football game here yesterday, but that was moved because of the storm. But how uncertain, if you watch college football, what you think is going to happen in the beginning of the game and how the game actually ends up, right? It can be immensely different than what we think. Chances are you know what the outcome is going to be based on what you're given before the game starts. We're still very early in this game. We're going to have most of the day tomorrow with the storm not moving very much. And until we see a definitive turn to the north and a move away from Florida that gives us more modeling, gives us more forecasts that take it well offshore, we cannot rule out Florida. We look at trends, and trends are a great way to forecast. You want to look at that. And if you have been watching over the coming day or the past days and seeing that shift, that is good. But it doesn't mean clear. It doesn't mean Florida is completely clear. So here in Jacksonville, the mayor is going to make the decision, what we understand, in the morning, whether or not if there's going to be mandatory evacuations. The next couple of days, the next few days, students are not going to be in school. Of course, Labor Day, and a lot of people are going to want to go out to the beaches. That's not going to happen with beaches closing up and down the Florida coastline. We just don't know how bad it's going to be. But chances are, somewhere in Florida, it is going to be bad, where there's going to be some problems. A matter of how bad it's going to be, we just don't know. Right now, we want to go to Deerfield Beach. That's where we find Dave Malkoff. And we know Dave was in Orlando talking to people that have had their vacations disrupted. But Dave, when we talk about people that visit Florida for all the beautiful beaches, that's one side of things. But you have to think now of so many millions of people left unknown what they're going to do. Right? Hopefully they have a plan in place and just getting word to figure out if they have to evacuate or not. Still a lot of unknowns, Dave.
It's really tough to make that call if you're a tourist or if you're someone managing the airport. At the beginning, they were thinking, well, maybe we're going to close the airport on Monday, the management of the airport. But then they decided to keep it open for Monday, so that kind of changed people's plans. Some people did leave earlier by themselves because of this storm coming in. But think about where we're standing here. It may look like a beautiful day here on the beach, but only 71 miles that way. 71 miles, that's all that connects us and West End on Grand Bahama Island. So this storm is coming this way. Will it take a turn up north? That is the question. We are watching that from the hurricane hunters. We're also watching that from the satellite. And there are so many variables here. Stay tuned right here to the Weather Channel. We will have a live report coming up after this break. This is Tracking Dorian.
Keeping the night interesting.
Ever experienced before, and this is everything, including the kitchen sink that Hurricane Dorian has to throw at us. I'm at my house here in central Abaco. We believe that it's structurally sound, but that remains to be seen. I'm holding on with my family here.
Certainly got to hope it is structurally sound there in Abaco Island because the storm is relentless. It is pounding the Bahamas, and it's far, far from over. Hours and hours. Potentially this time tomorrow, still talking about the storm raking across the Bahamas. And then the scenes we're seeing across parts of the Bahamas, it's possible, not ruling it out yet, with hurricane warnings now up for parts of the Florida coast. It is possible we could see a very strong storm approaching very near, if not onto, the state of Florida. I'm here in Jacksonville, Florida, the far northern part of the state, and the storm is eventually going to come by here. Whether it goes right over where we are here in Jacksonville, that's a possibility. Whether it's going to go offshore and produce some very heavy rain, strong winds, possibly tropical storm force winds right here in Jacksonville. That is also possible. And then there is the heavy rain threat that is certainly going to be one of the big issues. We see the forecast showing the heaviest rain offshore, but I hope we've learned, as we've seen, and in many cases for the better, not necessarily we can take that to the bank, but as we've seen, the forecast is always subject to change, especially when we see a monster storm like we are seeing right now over the Bahamas this close to Florida. We do absolutely need to pay attention to this in the state of Florida, and then eventually into Georgia and into the Carolinas. And it is in Georgia, in Savannah, where we find meteorologist Felicia Combs. Felicia.
So here in Savannah, the general feeling is that everyone is enjoying their Labor Day weekend for now, but continuing to prepare as we wait and see exactly what Dorian is doing. This area has been hard hit by hurricanes over the past few years, and so everyone is really taking this seriously. In the Savannah area, the Savannah College of Art and Design, as well as Savannah State University, already making some changes and some closures on their campus. And in fact, the Savannah College of Art and Design going to be closed until September 9th. And if you look
for the strongest landfalling hurricane in the Atlantic Basin with the 1935 Labor Day hurricane. That's incredible. It's just absolutely incredible. And when you look at it, I mean, how many of us would have thought we'd have seen a perfectly formed hurricane? The eye on that is just truly will drop your jaw. You can see all the way down to the surface of the ocean here, getting hit in the Abaco Islands right now. That's this island chain right here. Then where Freeport is, this island that extends east to west here, that is Grand Bahama Island. As some of you might be familiar with a place like Freeport, they've got a port there where some of the cruise ships will come in. But you can see some of the influence of the atmosphere here that is causing some bands of thunderstorms here into Florida. Winds aren't that bad right now, but winds will potentially become tropical storm force later on tonight or tomorrow along the east coast of Florida. Plenty of rain still to come here, not to mention the surge in the Bahamas. It's an awful disaster for them right now. The images that we're getting show water everywhere and significant wind damage, but rain could also be prevalent along the coast of Florida here. And when you take a look, by the way, at the landfall, Elbow K, Cat 5, winds 185 and a pressure at 911 millibars. It's absolutely stunning. Allen, the most intense Atlantic hurricane making wind speed, but the Labor Day hurricane, the Hurricane Center says that one may have been the one with the most intense windfall land speed. Folks, we're going to talk a lot more about this. What happens to Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas still to come. Let's get back out to the field, though. Dave Malkoff for us tonight in Deerfield Beach, Florida. Dave.
Yeah, we just want to take you down to the beach here in Deerfield Beach, where you can see that the entire county here, which is Broward County, we're at the northern end of Broward County, is under a tropical storm warning at this point, meaning that they are expecting tropical storm winds to actually reach here. But imagine if we were just talking about a tropical storm, we would still have a major situation on our hands. A lot of people just enjoying the beach here today, but this could change. Just 71 miles away from us is Grand Bahama Isle, and that is getting hit by Dorian right now.
Stay tuned to get a free pan from Granite Stone. Stuck on eggs, burnt on.
Are we waiting for a certain event to occur? Yes, Cindy, we are waiting for a certain event to occur. So at this point, what's been steering has been this high pressure over the Atlantic, Bermuda high here, and that's what's pushed it west, okay? What we're waiting for is that high to weaken slightly and shift. And as it does, and it becomes less of a player, it opens up an avenue for Dorian to start to creep to the north here. And that's the turn that we're anticipating, okay? So that's why the forecast brings it north with the computer models. And this is why we still think coastal Florida, coastal Georgia, and then south and North Carolina are still in play.
They're live.
Video into the Weather Channel, Labor Day weekend. A lot of people wanting to go to the beaches like Myrtle Beach, where red flags are flying and becoming increasingly dangerous to not just be in the water, but eventually it's going to be too dangerous to be even near the water. And I'm understanding right now we are getting some breaking news into the Weather Channel that there were mandatory evacuations, I believe, for South Carolina going into effect for coastal communities. Again, breaking right now, mandatory evacuations for coastal communities in South Carolina as areas close to the water, close to the beaches will be at greatest threat, greatest risk for some of the biggest impacts from this massive storm. Now, you may be wondering, well, with the uncertainty of this, the track's still unknown exactly where it's going to go. When we look at the forecast cone, it's possible the center of the storm could still go outside of it. But evacuations take time, and that is really the difficult thing. And sometimes the time it takes to evacuate is more than our ability to know exactly where that storm is going to be. But the stakes, we have seen time and time again and are seeing right now in the Bahamas, the stakes are high. And it is certainly something that is on the mind of the community leaders and government officials, those people that want to keep you safe. It's in everyone's best interest to make sure that everyone in harm's way is out of harm's way. And another thing, Mike, as we go back to the Web Channel, Mike Bettis. Mike, I've been, to Folly Beach for storms, Morehead City, in the Carolinas, and I'm sure you've heard this too. People will say, oh, I lived through this storm. I lived through that storm. And no two storms are the same. And there's a lot we don't know about this storm, but there's also a lot we do know about this storm right now. Yeah. And Mike, one of those is that it is a big storm. It is a powerful hurricane, possibly one for the record books.
185-mile-per-hour winds right now, Chris, which we don't often talk about. Those kind of winds in the Atlantic Basin. We can talk about that in the Eastern Pacific, the Western Pacific, where we tend to get these really big super typhoons, but not necessarily in the Atlantic do we see a storm like this. As far as size goes, let's call it a small to medium-sized storm, but it's gotten bigger over the last few days. But 185-mile-per-hour winds is astounding. And then a lot of us asking, okay, well, is that going to sustain itself all the way to Florida? Not likely, okay? We think it's going to come down some. Will it come down dramatically in the next 24 hours? Probably not. It's probably going to come down maybe another 15 or 20. But all in all, folks, it's a very dangerous storm. Want to let you know, by the way, that right now Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is holding a press conference. We want to join that in progress right now.
Additional hurricane warnings and watches all the way up to the Georgia border on the east coast of Florida. So you can pretty much set your clock to that. And you can see tropical storm force winds arriving on Florida's Treasure Coast as early as late tonight. And of course, you have storm surge in places like Jupiter Inlet, forecast to be between 4 and 7 feet. There's a number of evacuation orders that have been issued. Volusia County, Indian River County, Duval County, Nassau County, and St. Johns County. They've all issued new orders today. And of course, Martin, Palm Beach, Brevard, St. Lucie had issued orders already. We've also have a number of counties that have issued voluntary evacuation orders: Osceola, Glades, Hendry, Okeechobee, Highland. If you are in an area that has flooded in prior hurricanes and you're given a voluntary evacuation order, you really need to seriously consider heeding that and evacuating. When the water gets high, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. And given the uncertainty of the storm, it's better to err on the side of safety. The Coast Guard is beginning to lock down some movable bridges to marine traffic. But to be clear, these bridges are still open to motorists. And of course, if there's any changes to that, we'll announce that. Palm Beach International will cease all commercial air service beginning tomorrow, and Orlando Melbourne International plans to close on Monday evening. We're monitoring every road in the state, FDOT. And the traffic has not been abnormal. In fact, I think the non-hurricane related traffic has probably been less than we would typically have on a Labor Day weekend. And we obviously will make accommodations to make sure that those subject to evacuation orders are able to evacuate as efficiently as possible. By tonight, the Florida National Guard will have 4,500 soldiers and airmen activated and ready to respond. They have 15 rotor wing helicopters available and additional.
Hurricane hunters, by the way. So some new information, and I think my my computer here just keeps skipping forward on me here. I'm going to just go ahead and go back just a little bit here to get you some information. There's a look at the Bahamas satellite here. That's an incredibly quick satellite, folks. So you take a look at what's happening for us here in the Bahamas. This thing is just going to pour rain on us here, unfortunately, across the Bahamas. Another 18 to 24 inches of rain is going to fall for us here. Rain still in our forecast here in Florida. 3 to 5 inches. Isolated spots, maybe 5 to 8 inches of rain could be coming our way. Take a look, by the way, at the landfall we had this morning, or just afternoon, I should say. El Bouquet. Category 5, 185 again, tied for the maximum wind speed at landfall in Atlantic Basin history. Pressure, 911 millibars. It really bottomed out this morning. Greatest wind speed of any hurricane in the Atlantic Basin was Allen, 190 mile per hour winds. We are just 5 miles an hour below that. Really giving you some perspective how dangerous this is and how many recent hits have we had in the Bahamas from major hurricanes? Several. From 1992, Andrew, Floyd in 99, Gene in 2004, and then Matthew just 3 years ago. And Matthew taking a very similar track to what Dorian potentially could. Okay, so I want to put that cone back on there and show you where this may be headed. Paralleling the coast of Florida, making a turn we're anticipating. The center track may come very close at this point to the South Carolina or North Carolina coastlines here. In fact, both very reliable models, the GFS model and the European model, actually have it hitting North Carolina, potentially somewhere between Wilmington and Hatteras here. But look how strong the winds are, even by Thursday. 4 days from now, still a Category 2 hurricane. This thing has been an incredible storm with incredible winds here. Take a look at the wind speed probabilities that we're thinking could happen for us here, including through Florida. This is tropical storm force winds. We already have the tropical storm warnings, by the way, posted along coastal Florida here. Tropical storm force winds, high probability here, 70 to 90% chance on the east coast of Florida. South Florida, including Fort Lauderdale and Miami. You are not in the cone right now. You do not have watches or warnings. It all begins up in Palm Beach County, okay? So it all begins around Lake Worth here and West Palm Beach and then goes north from there. As of right now, Fort Lauderdale and Miami, you're not in that. Then take a look at where it goes from there. The European model then pushes it farther north off the Georgia coastline. South Carolina and North Carolina coast could get really heavy rain through Thursday. That's going to be the other risk. It's onshore flow and storm surge. It's heavy rain and flooding from rain. It's wind, which could cause some sporadic power outages, could cause some damage here. So those are all things that are things we will consider here. But also, folks, don't concentrate on exactly the center line and say, I'm in the clear. I'm not going to get hit. That's the center line of Dorian, okay? But I want you to notice that it doesn't even hit land, at least that center track, until it gets to North Carolina. Then consider this. The track errors, the historical track errors are quite large. The 4-day average track error, by the way, and from the center out, is 170 miles. So from that point, go in any direction 170 miles. That would just be the normal error in the track of the cone 4 days out. 5 days out, it's 200 miles, folks. So again, don't always think exactly about the center point, Chris. History has shown us it varies quite a bit, day 4 and day 5, okay? A lot of things can happen between now and then. If you're prepared, you're ready, you'll be in a lot better shape.
Yeah, and that's such an important point, Mike, is that a lot can change in just a matter of a few days. And it can change a lot, too, when you look at just how uncertain that forecast really is. Here in Jacksonville, Florida, a lot can change in a couple of minutes. We're getting soaked once again with some heavy rain. And the cloud producing this shower is very obvious. We watched it rolling in, building, and now rolling in, coming from the direction of where the ocean is. This is just one shower. We know this is going to pass. However, when hurricane, well, right now we are getting crushed by another heavy rain shower, and this is just one shower. We know this is going to be coming to an end a matter of a few minutes. This isn't going to last all day. It's not going to last all night. And unfortunately, we can't say the same thing about our friends in the Bahamas, as the storm, in all its fierceness and all of what it has to punch and bring, is bringing this times 1,000 If you can imagine that, the rain that's coming down, the surge that's coming down. Where we are here along the St. Johns River, the rain's coming down. It's so heavy. I don't know how well if you can see this, but there's little bits of foam. And the water itself is sort of splashing back up, so it has right at the surface a sort of misty look to it all. And this is one shower, and it's Florida, it's summertime. This is what you would expect. It comes and it goes. But with a tropical storm, an impending tropical storm, or a hurricane, possibly a Cat 4 as it approaches Florida, there's still a chance that there could be a landfalling major hurricane in the state of Florida. There's also a chance there won't be. That's one thing that has got to be extremely frustrating for the residents of Florida and all the people whose lives are being affected by this. And millions of people are going to be affected by this. And it is going to be a matter of, are you being impacted as an inconvenience, or is it a potentially life-changing storm, which certainly is on the table. And that is an extremely unfortunate situation with this. I want to go to meteorologist Mike Bettis at the Weather Channel. And Mike, as we're seeing and feeling a pretty heavy rain shower right here, you know, and as uncomfortable and annoying as a rain shower can be, I can see blue sky over here. Yeah. There's end in sight. But for so many people in Florida and the Bahamas, there's so many questions that we can't answer right now. In the Bahamas, we know it's moving away, but unfortunately, it's over the Bahamas right now. And Florida, unfortunately, next up, and it's going to be one way or another. We just can't say with all 100% certainty just yet how bad it's going to be.
For Florida, the fine details aren't there just yet. We've got a decent idea of what's about to play out, but little changes make all the difference in the world. We know certainty that the Bahamas are getting hit with potentially the worst hurricane they've ever seen. All right, you take a look at what this is doing to Abaco Island, now Little Abaco, and then this is Grand Bahama Island that stretches out here east to west. There's not a lot of population, by the way, on the east side of Grand Bahama Island. They've got a lot of sandbars there, small, tiny little streets there that might have a few houses or shops on them, but most of the population is going to be on the west side of the island. Having said that, the west side of the island is going to get hit. Now, I want to say this. It's moving west at 5 miles per hour, okay, and it's 70 miles from Freeport, so that puts it into Freeport about 14 hours from now. Again, it's only going to move from where it is now to Freeport over the course of 14 hours. So it's a slow-moving storm. It's going to take a very long time to exit the Bahamas. It's going to do a lot of damage before it finally leaves there when it comes to surge, when it comes to rainfall, when it comes to wind. There's a look at the radar out of Miami. And again, getting close to Sweeting Cay now, Michaels Cay. And eventually it's going to go over towards, say, the High Rock area, which sits about right in there, a little bit of population there. But the eye is impressive. It's got a ton of lightning around it as well. Some of the outer bands now eventually getting in here to the east coast of Florida. West Palm Beach right now gusts to 26. Fort Lauderdale gusts to 16. Fort Lauderdale, by the way, you're not in the cone. Neither are you in Miami. You're not under any watches or warnings. They all begin around West Palm Beach. Okay, there's a look at the cone. Stays very intense tomorrow. Stays very intense on Tuesday, Cat 4. Stays intense on Wednesday, Cat 3. So we are forecasting some weakening, but not a lot. And again, the cone paralleling most of the coast here if you take the center track. And both the reliable models of the GFS and the European do make a landfall near Hatteras or between Hatteras and Wilmington, North Carolina. Hurricane watches, hurricane warnings in effect here. West Palm up toward Daytona Beach here. So again, anticipating hurricane conditions within the next 48 hours potentially. Tropical storm warning in effect in West Palm Beach, where we think in the next 5 to 6 hours tropical storm force winds get there. But those also could extend inland as well. Where's this thing going? What's steering it? There's the high pressure. That's what's been pushing it westbound here. But then the low has also been blocking it a bit. That low right there. So that's why it's gone so slowly here with a ridge really built in north. That's why it hasn't come north. As that high relaxes, the low relaxes. There's an avenue for this to come north, and eventually we think come northeast with a trough picking it up and steering it in that direction. More.
Discover new San Pellegrino Essenza,